This is CheloniaCast, episode 48. Today we are joined by Sibille Pritchard, who's one of the most accomplished and inspiring people that we have the fortune of knowing within the realm of business, at the international and local scale. She's trained in journalism and government and public relations, and has just done an incredible amount of things that we can't even list here, but we'll have listed in the description. She was also very interested in the arts and was listed as one of Orlando Magazine's most powerful in entertainment and arts, and was also married to Dr. Peter Pritchard, who's the foremost turtle and tortoise biologist, who's done more than anyone else for the conservation and study of turtles and tortoises. We're really excited to have her on and honored today to talk to her about some of her and to learn more about Dr. Pritchard, as well as to get her perspective on a lot of bigger topics. So thank you for joining us today. It's really an honor.
My pleasure. Absolutely. First of all, I want to say how excited I am to have you all do this, because I know you're all mentees of Peter's, and he would be absolutely thrilled to see the kind of progress you've made since you were little boys. So I'm actually thrilled, absolutely, to do this. So thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. We appreciate it. So, Mrs. Pritchard, what was it like growing up in Guyana, and how did you find an interest in journalism?
Well, when I was growing up in Guyana, it was British Guyana. So it was very much and very, very British. So my education was very British. And it was lovely. I had a wonderful childhood. I have to admit that I was never really interested in things of nature. So I didn't really know anything about turtles or anything at that point. I knew they existed, but never had any interest in them. And but it was wonderful. I had a very, very interesting and very good childhood. What was the other question? Was the other part of it?
How did you find your interest in
journalism? Okay, well, when I went to school, I was always a reader. I loved reading. I read, all kinds of books from very early age. I was very, very much into philosophy, and I loved Shakespeare and still do. And things were leading me towards a career in writing, although my father wanted me to be a lawyer. He thought I had good argumentative skills. Like, they couldn't win an argument against me even at age 3. So anyway, I understood very well the meaning of the word no. So anyway, so I got into journalism through school, first editing the school newspaper, and then eventually got into it as a job. And I was an editor, ended up being an editor of the Guyana Graphic, which was one of the main newspapers in Guyana at the time. It was also, at that time, most of those papers were owned by other big British papers, was owned by the Times and owned by the Mirror Group and all of that. So all the papers had an international aspect of it. So it was a good time to be growing up.
Good.
And you went to school abroad, right? So that must have been an interesting experience. Maybe you could talk about that and what you learned.
Well, I wouldn't go too much. I went to a convent. As an interesting experience, because I wasn't exact, so I was always getting detentions and things like that. I wasn't the most popular people to the Carmelite nuns that ran the convent. I wouldn't say the name of the convent to save them. Here in at an international school, finishing school, where I was finished. But yeah, that was something. It seems like a long time ago. I'm so old now, but I do have very good memories of school, and sort of, I'd always been, somebody who was not a normal player of the rules. I always was sort of like Peter a bit. I always was on the other side of the spectrum of always trying to bend rules where I can. I believed in that everything was possible. And so I was, I probably was a very difficult child, I would imagine, but I grew out of it. I'm much more calm now.
Now, speaking of Peter, we're interested in knowing how you two met.
Yeah. Well, I was a journalist, and Peter was at the time at Oxford. And he came to Guyana. His a relative, it was an uncle, I think, was the Governor General of Guyana, Sir Richard Late. And he was staying at Government House, and I was a journalist at Government House. And I met him because I knew almost everybody, because as a journalist, I just started journalism actually. But I knew everybody in Guyana and people who were coming in. So he was a stranger at the party. And I think I went over to him and asked him what he was doing there. And he told me that he was interested in turtles. So I thought it was the most bizarre thing I'd ever heard. It was like, what? And and then he started telling me how he brought these turtles to give to the governor to keep in his yard. And so he had like 5 tortoises. I don't know where he got them from, but he brought them. So the governor was keeping tortoises in his yard. And anyway, so that was the first time we met. He kept coming back to Guyana for various reasons because of his interest in turtles. He was still at Oxford at the time, and later transferred to the University of Florida. But before he did that, we met several times. And every time he came over, a friend of the governor's, who was also a friend of mine, would call me and say, "The turtle guy is here. He's asking about you." And I would say, "You mean the turtle nut?" But yeah, he was definitely interested in turtles, which my family and I both thought was, who is this to be? And anyway, the short story of it, side of it, is that he did change just about a year or so after we met, maybe 2 years after, and went to University of Florida. Mm-hmm. So just about the same time, that was a little after I came to New York. But anyway, he went to University of Florida, Archie Carr, and then he really started coming to Guyana to study turtles because he was interested in the sea turtles, and he found the beach, the most famous sea turtle beach, in Shell Beach, which he found. And I can tell a little story about that because apparently he went there. This is a story by other people and him. He went there. It was a very somewhere that was literally away from everything. It was like the end of the world, Shell Beach. It was that is between Guyana and Venezuela. The nearest spot is Venezuela. It's just the ocean. The closest village to it is Namarin Village, which you'd have to take a boat to go, which would take you about an hour. So anyway, he got some people to take him there, and he said, "I'm going to go look at turtles and stuff. Come back for me in a week." So he carried his stuff for a week. They never came back. And so he was actually there weeks with nobody coming back. And then some people found him. And he became a very good guy who found them. Saved him by finding him. But he knew to show up because they came to get the turtle eggs on that beach. So he knew eventually, but he was on his own, going when. And so while he was there, he kept studying the sea turtles and stuff. He had a good chance to do that. And, so anyway, so that was the story of how he started the Shell Beach, which still goes on today, by the way.
Mm-hmm. Right.
That's incredible.
Yeah.
Yeah. So something it's just fascinating. Like he was such a unique person in a lot of ways, and seems like he was both sort of that adventurer, really. Mm-hmm. Sort of a wild man in a sense, but also could get into any and a really top-notch scientist at the same rate. And that can be a very rare thing. I'm curious, early on, when was the first experience you had with him where you realized that?
Yeah, well, Peter and I went on a trip to Baja California before we were married. And you have to realize that I had never been camping in my life. Everybody assumed, because I was from Guyana, that, Peter found me in a tree in the jungle somewhere. But I had been a city girl, as you well know, and I didn't do anything. I'd never. In fact, the story is, my father said that the closest thing I ever came to camping, the Girl Scouts, or the Girl Guides, or whatever they call them here, invited me to join them. And I said, "Do you have to sit on the ground? Because if it's on the ground, I'm not joining." So that was how. And I didn't, because I had of sitting on the ground with anything. So, so Peter managed to. I was in New York, and he managed to encourage me by showing me these incredible pictures of Baja California, and all these beautiful trees and how gorgeous it was. And he said, the only people who ever do this are people who do a rally because there was no road.
Right.
And so he said, this is going to be a really good adventure, good chance for you to see this. So I agreed. I had no idea what I was getting myself into. He had a brand new Land Rover, which about halfway through the trip was in pieces. I mean, this was off, that was off, this wasn't running, the battery was there. I mean, it was it was the worst trip of my life. That's when I thought, this guy is insane. I've got to start to run like hell. Because, and, he kept telling me all the time. And I did see all those things. That was quite good. But I was really angry because it was not what I expected. I really thought that there were going to be hotels everywhere. There wasn't. He had a hammock. And it was the hammock being struck. Then they had no gas stations or anything. You had to find people and gas out of the thing with a bucket.
Oh,
Fill up your,
jeez.
so you never knew when you were going to get, if you were going to get it.
Yeah.
It was, never saw a soul except once in that whole trip for 2 weeks.
Oh my goodness.
That time there was no road. This was in 1970.
Wow.
And there was no road.
Yeah.
And anyway, so that was when I discovered it was. But this was about Peter, because he had these different sides to him, because he was really Indiana Jones of this trip. It's just so sort of like, well, back if you want to, knowing fully well I couldn't possibly get back.
Yeah.
If you have any complaints, put it in writing and I'll read it when I get home.
That's awesome.
That was absolutely hated him. But then we got through Baja California itself, and got to some friends who were a good friend of his who had gone to University of Florida with. He's died since, and his father was very well known. He was a psychologist, but his father was a very well known person. His mother was an actress. Anyway, and then I saw the side of Peter, because he became this sophisticated person who was totally different from the person I was traveling on the trip. He was very urbane. He knew all about good music and wine and this, that. And I was like, this person is sort of like a conundrum in a way, because it's this side and that side. But then I saw that he did have many sides to him, because Peter could tell you just as much about Beethoven or Bach or literature or Shakespeare as he could about turtles. I mean, that's his Renaissance person. And plants. His interest in cycads. I've seen every cycad garden in the world. And his interest in cycads was something that amazed me, because most people I say, do you know what a cycad is? They say, no, what's that? And I say, well, it's the oldest plant in the world. It was dinosaurs were here. And he knew every cycad place to go to in the world we went to. He looked it up. He was interested in palms, and he became an expert in palms. So there was this other side of him. I was very interested in the ballet, and he got interested in the ballet. He got to like the ballet, which was really that other side. But of course, his main interest was turtles, and I had to come to terms with that. Turtles came first, I came second.
Yeah.
That was that was the order, So I took that order quite well. I realized, so I was able to live with that. Yes, he was absolutely, obviously from a child, interested in turtles, and he made it. He was very, very serious and sincerely interested in not just getting other people, which he did. He was like a Pied Piper for turtles, getting other people. His biggest love was having young people get interest. As soon as they showed a spark of interest, he would let them do whatever he can to help them get it. And it didn't matter if they actually studied turtles alone or whether they went into other fields of biology, but he just wanted them to get out there and understand nature and not just sit in front of a TV.
Right.
That was his whole thing. There's so much out there for you to learn. And he did that. The thousands, literally thousands of young people who came through the Institute over the years that studied turtles with Peter was astounding. And when we traveled the world, it was the same thing. We would have, in Japan one time, this young man who had Peter's book, and we had left Tokyo and gone to some other part of Japan, and he spent 3 days outside our hotel waiting to get Peter to sign his book until we came back. I mean, that was the kind of, and that guy, I have to tell you, is right now the head of a university in Japan.
Wow.
and is an expert on immunology.
Wow.
So that's that happened.
Yeah, he touched a lot of people. And
Yeah.
he captivating writer,
Yeah.
and just in terms of, you look at people now that are Turtle Field and such, and I think there's more specialization nowadays to some extent, but there's not the writing part. It seems like anyone fills that niche.
Yeah.
It's really fascinating. So one of the first encounters with him, that Baja trip, that's fascinating.
That was it. Yeah.
Yeah, you also went on a trip to Peru, or there's early
Yes,
on?
immediately after. Yeah, I said I'd never do another trip again, by the way. And then he started pictures of all these llamas in Peru and blah blah blah. And I was like, yeah, I'd love to see llamas.
There's a pattern emerging.
Because I'm seeing how this.
Yes, it wasn't turtles. He showed me these other things.
Yeah.
I was going to study turtles, but he was showing me all these things. You never saw a llama. Look at this, beautiful. Look at this. And so at Machu Picchu, all of that grabbed my attention. So we went to Peru. Another bad trip, because it was winter. He never told me.
Yeah.
And because it was summer here. And I went with my hot pants and whatnot. And the first thing I got there was like, this is freezing cold.
Oh, no.
So I had to buy a coat, which I wore all the time to be warm, because I didn't have the right clothes. But one of the things he did was, this is an interesting story too, because I'm sure people at the University of Florida may have, those who are left who would remember this. But we went to a place, which I wish I could remember the name. The sea turtles were in Peru. We had to get out to, and I just can't remember the name of it. It's a beach. And we had to drive through desert, literally, to get there. And we rented a car. And they told us that the car, it was a Beetle.
Okay.
And they told us the car that it never rained. No windshield wipers. The first thing that happened when we got to the desert was it poured rain. So we had no windshield wipers. So we couldn't see a thing going. And
That's scary.
Anyhow, we got to the beach, and Pisco.
Okay.
It was Pisco. And this, in a story called The Birds, this beach was where the birds went to die, and it's absolutely true. There were a lot of there is a movie about this, an old movie, and there are a lot of shorebirds and stuff. That's where it's like their burial ground. I've never seen anything like it. But anyhow, we went there to look for turtles. I don't think we found signs of it, but anyway. But what he found this seal-looking thing on the beach. It looked like a seal to me. It was dead and been rotting for I don't know how long. And I knew what was going to happen. Peter said, you might want to stay down upwind or wherever, not downwind, because I'm going to take the head of this back. He said, because this is something I've never seen before. So I had to sit up there, and he took a couple hours to cut this thing. He sort of tried to get as much of the dead meat off of it, whatever, and packed it with sand, and in the car it came. It was horrendous. And then he not only took it there, but we had to take it to our hotel room.
Oh.
So, because he had to clean it out. So guess where he cleaned out? In the bathtub. It was awful. And then he bought some sheets, which he tied it up in with more sand, and made a string and hung it out the window of the hotel. So it was outside the window of the 8 stories up.
Is that so the smell wouldn't waft around? Yeah.
So the people wouldn't complain, the maids and stuff, when they came in. Of course, you could smell it.
Oh, yeah.
And anyway, but when I went down and looked up, I could see the flies around the thing.
Oh, jeez.
But anyway, we brought it back. And at that time, Peter had, he could bring it to the U.S. at that time because he had very good relations with people at the Miami airport. So as they saw him, they went, University of Florida. And they would and they knew he was bringing all this dead stuff. So pass. We don't want to have to deal with it. Anyway, he brought it back, and he took it to the University of Florida, to the museum. And there was a professor there named Professor Broadcorp, who was like the ultimate mammals or whatever. And sure enough, when he took it to him, it was the second one they've ever found.
Oh my.
Whoa,
It's still there.
that's incredible.
You should ask about. Yeah, and I don't know what it's called, but it looks like a seal. But it's
Wow.
the second they'd ever found. And so they were absolutely excited beyond belief to happen. Then Peter said to me, "Never interfere with science." So the thing was, I was never to complain again about anything he brought, because it may be the only one. So that was a rule after that. I was like, don't complain again about things that looks bad, because it may be important to bring back. Because he always brought things back for the on the University of Florida, things that were outside the turtle, birds, or anything he saw that was dead, that could be of use to them. So yes, that was the Peru story.
Wow.
That's incredible. I mean, I put my family through quite a bit of stress with all the carcasses and things I brought back for the same purposes that he did. It was his writings and everything were so inspiring to me when I was young.
Yeah.
Agreed. I'm curious, with all these early on trips, what was Peter's goal? Like the purpose of these trips to Mexico and Peru?
We're studying.
Study. Okay,
Yes,
cool.
Yeah, he did a lot of, he was at the University of Florida. And then later on, of course, when he started the Institute, it took on a different role. He was still studying the things and so on. But yeah, he was studying and writing papers and stuff at the time. When we were on those trips, he just finished his PhD. And then he got a job working at CN.
Wow.
Yes,
Okay.
he was with Archie Carr. He was the chief scientific officer for IUCN.
And was this, so these were early trips before you were married,
Mhm.
but that must have been interesting. At what point did you think that you may have come a long way to, this is
Yeah,
crazy, to
yeah,
I'm
yeah,
Peter.
yeah.
So what was
Yeah.
that like?
Okay, well, it was after the Peru trip, actually.
Okay.
We came back, and he said, both of these trips I thought were so insane. And to be honest, I didn't think I would end up with Peter, because it was so unusual. But he was also so fascinating, because anytime you think you understood him, another side would come out. So for me, I found him very, very interesting. I mean, as a person, up to the very end of his life, I always thought he was the most interesting man I'd ever known. And so that's the interest it kept, because I'm a bit of a kook, so I'm interested in kooks.
Right. I can.
It's not, normal people don't interest me. Normal in the sense of the word of. So I was very attracted to that, very much so. And then we got married just after that in Gainesville, and then we started going down to get to French Guiana. We did a lot of work. He found the beach in French Guiana as well, where sea turtles were found. He also found that beach, which was one of the most important at the time too. And then so we had it went French Guiana to Mexico, Galapagos, and I mean then we had this round of things we did every year. This time of year, that time of year. Then it brought, we used to go to Costa Rica. We started going to Asia, Africa, the four main places. Peter never did any work in the U.S. He advised people who did work in the U.S. a lot, and he went to their projects. He actually never studied anything. And of course, sea turtles. He was interested, but in terms of sea turtles. So we went to we had a sort of a calendar through Mexico, Rancho Nuevo, with the sea turtles, and then we went to the Galapagos, where he was doing tortoises and also sea turtles, and then the Guianas, mainly French Guiana, where he was doing sea turtles as well, and then Guyana, the Shell Beach. So that was like a circuit for us.
That was kind of the early on circuit.
Yes.
That's fascinating. Maybe we can dive into each of those adventures a little bit. The Mexico is sort of fascinating in the sense of nowadays it's very different there, and trying to get there can be challenging just because of the situation. But you've had the ability to see a lot of the beauty there.
Yeah.
And maybe you could just expand upon what that was like, what it was like traveling there, some of the memories from that.
Yeah. Well, when we were going to Mexico, I had 2 kids at that point, Sebastian and Dominic. And it was first Sebastian and Dominic came along, so there were 2. So we went every, I don't remember what time of the year we went there. We went in January and February to the Galapagos. So it might have been May or something we went to. Might have been April and May we went to Mexico. I can't remember the exact months every time. But anyway, but it was quite a journey to get there even then, because it was in Tamaulipas, Mexico, which apparently now is almost impossible to get to. But we went to, we would go to Brownsville, Texas, was where we sort of got set up.
Mm-hmm.
And then we went with this Land Rover, by the way, with our 2 kids. The Land Rover still ran. We had it fixed and so on and so forth. So we had this time. We'd go to Mexico, Tamaulipas. To get into where the beach was absolutely, I think it was a couple of miles in on a dirt road that when it rained, you couldn't get in unless you had a 4-wheel or something, because the mud and stuff would just eat up your tires. And there's another story about that. But anyway, so we'd go there and you go to the beach. And when Peter started that project, he started with Rene Marquez, who was a biologist as well, a sea turtle biologist, who was well known, Mexican. And the 2 of them started it. And at that time, they were trying just to keep the poachers away. Because, as you know, Kemp Ridley was struggling to come back. There were just a few. Archie Carr had found the beach originally when there were thousands, and there was one picture which they went on, one little film they went on to show that this to be a big arrabada. Yeah. And so when Peter went back, it was a very little arrabada. So the idea was to bring it back, because it was on the verge of extinction. And so they had to bring in Marines. They had Marines from the Mexican Navy or whatever that stayed with us to keep poachers away. And so they loved it. There was a whole platoon of them. In fact, my sons spent all their time with the Marines, especially Sebastian. I think that's how he became a Navy SEAL. As he was all the time. I have pictures of him at his diaper in the Jeep with them. I can show you.
That is cool.
Yeah. He was always with them. They called him Nino. Nino Child Sebastian. And so he was constantly, but helped us to keep poachers away. So every year Peter had that there, and he used to get a lot of volunteers from universities. A lot of students came down from UCF, from University of Florida, from everywhere to volunteer in the program. And people from all over, some Mexican students, until it was taken over the zoo, to Pat Birchfield, who was at the zoo at Brownsville, and he took over the project, and it became a bigger project and stuff. But he's where the experiment was to move the eggs to Texas to see if they could was it eggs? No, turtles to Texas, baby turtle, to see if they could hatch and imprint on it on the beach. Right. There was some experiment. It worked apparently, and I forgot what they called it. What do they call it? They had a name for it. This experiment that they did with that. But anyway, and that because they did, but wherever the babies were born, apparently, they would imprint on life. Right. So that was. I'm not sure exactly how it worked, but that was an experiment they did a lot of, and but yeah, and then of course they did some of the Cayman Islands. But that was the Mexican part of it. But we had lots and lots of experiences in Mexico. We went to all Mexico, Veracruz and stuff, where any beach that had turtles in Mexico. And there was one particular experience I had, which was, again, all my experiences, if I think of it now, it's great. But at the time, they were horrendous. Horrendous. I thought I would die.
Right.
Now it's, I mean, I look at the Survivor and I think, are they kidding me? I did more than that. The Survivor program is nothing compared to what I did. And this was real, with no camera crew, no nothing, you know. Right. And anyway, we went to a place called Quininiquilapa, which is, I'm not sure which part of but it's a very dangerous part of Mexico. And there was a scientist who had seen sea turtles there, and Peter wanted to find out where they were. He'd flown over with a plane, had an idea of, in fact, he had a plane with his daughter born that he took to Mexico all the time, flew around, trying to find places where sea turtles nested. He did a lot of that. Anyway, they found this place, so we decided to. There were four of us: Renee, this other guy, and a scientist, a Mexican scientist, myself and Peter. We drove down there, which was forever. Anyway, and then we tried to find the beach. Well, I can tell you, we were driving, we could hear the beach, but there was no way you could get. We were driving for miles and miles and miles. There was no path you could go in to get to the beach. And finally they decided they'll cut the path through. So they got out their machetes and cutlasses and stuff, parked the vehicle, and they said, we'll go through here, because they could hear it. And this particular part they cut through was a sorrel field, and sorrel is a kind of a fruit that they make different things with, and it's got very prickly, big prickly branches. So you're cut up by the time you get through this. So they're slashing this in the night with a flashlight. We got to the beach, and they said, yeah, this we could see. By that time I was dead, and I said, I'm just going to lie right here. Give me your coat. I'm going to use it as a sleeping bag. I'm going to lie right here and fall asleep. I didn't care how dangerous it was. I said, you all go ahead and look for your beaches. And left me there.
the turtles first.
The first stories I have where I was lost and dying and everything else. So I just sat there. They went off. It was morning, and I don't see anybody. I think, my God, where are they? But Peter was so tall, you could always see him on the beach.
Right.
So eventually I saw them a long way off, and they came. Anyway, they came back, and I was just furious that they would leave me there until morning, and they wouldn't have a clue when I was kidnapped, when I was not a clue. And they were like, we didn't see anybody on the beach, so it was okay. Anyway, so we had to go through now. Well, of course, and we walked down. We found a perfectly good path from the beach to get to the road. It wasn't the same place where we left our car, but it was. So we got there, and there was a little village, and there was a woman making, things to eat and stuff. And so we decided to stop there and get some stuff to eat. And Renee Marquez and I had this game we played where I used to eat very hot peppers because I'm from Guyana. And as Peter said, I burnt off my taste buds as a baby. So the milk had peppers, he said. So lots of hot peppers, and Renee could too. So we used to dare each other to try pepper secretly, the hottest pepper. There was this big green pepper that Renee said he knew, unfortunately, it was very bad. He said, Sibille, let's do it. He said, so I said, oh, give me, and I tried it. We have a saying in Guyana, when you do something like this and literally black out, they say you see ning ning, which means you see stars. I absolutely stars. I kid you not. It was, everything went black and there were just stars, and I just thought I was going to die, the sensation. And they were saying, give her something, give her something. And this woman, but I couldn't drink the water. Right. So this woman had a small bottle of Coca-Cola, and she'd probably years, sitting there, and they gave it to me. But that was the worst thing, because it was old Coke, and then somebody, because I was literally passing out, if somebody said, give her some hot rice, which they had. And that sort of did it, some rice. Right. But I always remember that Quilhini Quilapa experience for being left on the beach, and then pepper. So that was it, yeah. But yeah, so we spent a lot of time all over. We used to go all over Mexico, as well as to all the ruins and all the things and stuff. We did a lot of the touring part of it too, because Peter was very interested in the history. So we went to, the Mayan ruins and stuff, and we were there and so on. And my kids, I literally grew up, on the beach, naked or in diapers, around the beaches in Mexico. They did. In fact, Dominic, when he was about 2, Sebastian had the Marines as friends, and Dominic was sort of left out because he had them. And so he went down to the village, walked down to the village by himself. It was very far, and he came back carrying a little Mexican boy holding his hand. And he was snotty and cold and whatever, but he had his hand. He came to me, he said, Mommy, I found a friend.
They brought it back.
Who knows how far or where he was?
Yeah, they
And
found
so-
a friend.
Yeah, so they became friends. We found out whose family was in the village. He stayed with us at the camp and so on. But he was so happy. He came, he was 2. He had this little boy by then, brought him all the way back.
Wow.
They couldn't speak the same language, but Dominic eventually picked up some Spanish and stuff. But they managed to get along, So, yeah, it was
Wow.
a very good childhood for them, too.
Yeah,
I mean, yeah, they grew up in nature. I mean,
right.
in nature in the true sense of the word, with nothing around.
Yeah.
It must have been a lot to raise. I mean, it sounds like it was a great thing, but just to have and be doing a lot of moving around and all that,
Yeah.
must have been a lot at times.
Yeah, because I took Sebastian when he was 6 weeks old in Galapagos. That's when he was 6 weeks. Everybody thought he was born on the way. And everybody's doctor said it was fine. Everybody thought it was insane. First of all, I knew nothing about babies. This was the first baby. I hadn't been around babies. First baby I had. Peter knew nothing about babies. But I had this book, Dr. Spock, which we read. Both of us read, change diaper day 1.
Changed.
Look for rash and so forth. And Sebastian grew up literally on his own in the sense. I said he was brought up by giant tortoises. They had more sense. But yeah, his playpen in the Galapagos was a huge box that the Bronx Zoo had sent back a tortoise back to the Galapagos. It had lived in the Bronx Zoo for a long time. Well, Sebastian's playpen was that box. That was the box. Yeah, we used that box to keep him in because it was big. And the reason why we did it, because wherever we could find shade in the Galapagos, there were poisonous trees.
Yeah.
The trees were all poisonous, and they dropped this little fruit, which if you eat it, just one bite can kill you.
Mm-hmm.
So that's where we had to live, because that's the only place that had shade. And we had this baby that would put anything in his mouth he found, so we had to find a way to contain him. So we made this. We had this box that Peter had a mesh over it.
It's a little cage.
So the things wouldn't drop in.
Yeah.
Wow.
It was incredible.
What year was it?
1972.
72? Okay.
Yeah, because Sebastian was
Yeah.
born in 72. And yeah, we went in 72. And also, the other thing was when he was like about a year old and stuff, he learned to swim when he was like a year. Before that even. But he could swim like a fish in the ocean. And when the way we found out he could swim was when he was 6 weeks old, a little older than that, because we went to the beach. We got to the Darwin station. We used to live at the Darwin station. Then we'd go off to the beaches on our own. We'd be left there for 3 weeks or 4 weeks at a time. Then they come back and get us. And with nobody there, no radio, no nothing. All you have, and the only water you have is what you bring, because there's no water unless it rained.
Mm-hmm.
So I couldn't wash my hair. I had to wash my hair in the sea. I mean, I was so mad. Because if I took even one drop of water, no, can't do that.
Yeah, right. Yeah.
And anyway, Sebastian learned to swim very early. And what he used to do was we then made a bigger playpen for him. Peter found some wood, which he did like a corral, around a big corral with some wood all around for more ships. And so he could stay in that corral. But you know what he learned to do? He learned from the tortoises. He used to bowl in the sand to the corral and escape. And go down to the sea. We just see this little person going.
Crawl out.
It's unbelievable.
That is.
We had to find ways he had to get tree trunks to put under the thing so he couldn't dig out. Under the bottom,
Tree
make a
trunks.
barrier, little tree stubs and things. Because he knew how to get out. Yeah, just like a tortoise.
That's what I would do with my tortoise is put rebar in.
Yes,
Yeah.
that was people. He was finding little pieces so he couldn't get out. Because we just see him going fast speed down to but he could swim very well, nevertheless. Yeah. So in answering that for kids, there's several things. I didn't know how to cook because I had never done cooking in my life.
Right.
I didn't know how to do any of that. And I learned to do all of that. I'm a cook now. I learned to do all of that over fire on beaches. I learned to bake bread in a biscuit tin. I learned to do everything you could ever imagined to cook. Peter used to run, the guys used to run the goat meat. Awful, because it'd be tough, like eating, rope.
Oh,
But it would look so good, but it was, so I learned to be one of those things that you hammered it with.
Yeah.
I learned to bring down things that
Tenderizer.
tenderizers. All kinds of things. So if they catch a goat meat, I could cook it, but still it wasn't these goats were like, as you do, they were just run around goats, so they had very strong smells. So you had to, I didn't eat it. I cooked it for them. I didn't actually eat it myself. I didn't like it. But Peter also, well, I can tell you, I wouldn't mind. He used to go and catch lobsters while he was swimming. He'd somehow find lobster when he was swimming. And he never had a glove or anything that to catch it with. So he used to take off his underwear or his swimming pants and catch them. And then he'd out to me, if there was anybody in the camp, he would shout to me across the thing, bring a towel or bring something. And because people would go, and then I'd have to take it to him, throw it to him, and then he could put it around him and come out.
Such a lobster.
His neck is in taper. So that's what he used to do. I mean, he was okay, but when other people were in the camp, he would scream to me, get a towel or something. But that's how he caught them. He'd always take his clothes off and catch them to pick them up. But he'd come back with this big lobster, which and I'd be saying, Peter, I can't believe you took off. He said, I couldn't hold it with my hand. I had to have something to put over it to get it.
Wow.
Yeah, so occasionally when he went swimming, we got a lobster. Occasionally, not every time.
Maybe not as efficient as the
No,
normal.
no.
Yeah.
No.
That's
Yeah.
fascinating.
Yeah.
Wait, going to the Galapagos, that must have been just incredible. I mean, a number of times I imagine you went. What are some of the potentially the issues up there? Some of the stories and the best memories from those trips.
Well, the Galapagos is unrecognizable to me now, except for the fact that when you go out to the islands and stuff and you see, they remain the same, the ones that are distant. Okay. But cruise and those areas where people live, when we lived there, the only people there was a small hospital, a bar, and a grocery store. And they had a Jeep. We stayed at the Darwin station. We lived at the Darwin station. There were a number of scientists that lived there. And we had a little house. It was like a row, all attached together. And we lived next to a young woman, she's no longer, she was young then, who was an expert on iguanas, on the iguanas and really, really good. Dagmar. And if you look her up, she's famous. She's very famous. She wrote books and things. And Dagmar had the end room, little house. It wasn't really, all it had was like, he didn't have any, he had to go to the station to eat and things like that. It was just really for sleeping and relaxing. And so it didn't have very much in it. Dagmar, who lived there for years, her room was the best. And things and pictures and this, all sorts of things she found. They were all found things, decorating. So she's a lovely place. In that sense, we were next to her, and the other to that was another famous. He was a botanist who he and his wife's name was Michelle. I can't remember his name, but anyway, not two scientists. They were from Europe, actually Denmark. But anyway, so we had these different people that lived, and then we had the guy who was the head of it, the director, and that's Peter Cram. One vehicle on the bus was there, and it was a Jeep, which you had to push, and it would jump start every time. You had to carry it up an angle or carry it down. I mean, that was the only vehicle they had, and we used to take it. They took it down into the grocery store to get groceries and things like that. That's what they used for it. But when we were there in the first year that I was there, Sebastian got sick because a lot of kids got sick from some sort of virus that they were killing killing young babies and stuff. It was a thing that caused that.
Okay.
And I knew nothing about babies, and Sebastian was just looking like sleeping a lot, and I just thought, oh, he's learning how to sleep a lot. This is good.
Yes.
And I took him into the Darwin station. Ulrika, the wife of Peter Kramer, the wife of the station of the Darwin station, said to me, Sebastian doesn't look good. He looks like he's ill. Let's take his temperature. And of course, it was very high. So we took him to the hospital. The doctor always spent. So we had to go to the bar to find the doctor. And he came in, quite sauced. And he said,
it's always a good sign.
Yeah. But there were several, I have to say, these people were so wonderful. They saved Sebastian's life.
Yeah.
They were the scientists.
Yeah.
I mean, they all came with me to the hospital, everybody in the bed.
Wow.
And they were telling him what to do because these people all had degrees and things. So they said, do you have any antibiotics? Because that's what he needs. And really funny, the reason why the kids were dying in the village was because most of the parents were fishermen, and the wives would not make any decision to take the children to the doctor unless the husband was there. And the husbands, if it's not there, the child just gets worse and worse. That was what was happening. Because if they took them to the hospital and got medicine, but they wouldn't take that to get permission from the husband, and the husbands were out fishing or wherever. So anyway, so they also helped that because they started bringing the kids in to the hospital. So he found some antibiotics that had passed it was like 6 months off its
Their expiration
date, and it was, should we use it not? And we thought we'd take the risk and use it.
Yeah.
But he was so dehydrated that we needed to have something, this is really interesting, to give him that would bring up his electrolytes in some way. And he wouldn't believe this, but the doctor said that if we can get a passing ship to give us some 7-Up. 7-Up.
Yeah.
And they went to every ship and asked, and they got a case of 7-Up. And we took turns giving Sebastian a tablespoon of 7-Up every few seconds, day and night. Because you couldn't give him the water, because the water is brackish in the Galapagos,
Right.
and it would have dehydrated him more. We got some bottles of water as well, but he said he wanted something that apparently 7-Up has electrolytes.
Oh.
I mean, it's not Gatorade,
Right.
but apparently it has a version of that.
Mhm.
Who knew?
I did.
When I came back and I told him, he said, yeah, that was a good idea.
Wow.
So I tell people that, and I say, never know when you're abandoned in some place what the thing will be that could save somebody's life. What it would. But I had several occasions of saving people's lives. So, but that was my son. But anyway, so I always remember how they were. They took turns. They had to, at one time I locked the door to sleep and I couldn't get the door open from the inside, and I panicked because they couldn't get in, who were helping me. And they actually went and took off the window from the outside, actually took the window off so they could jump through the window again. I mean, it was unbelievable. They were so nice. But anyway, so it was like a little family.
Yeah.
All the scientists, and we got to know them very well, and everybody knew what they did and stuff, and everybody looked out for everybody, because if you left and you went off for 4 weeks, you had to log in a book. When you left, who took you out, which boat took you out, and all.
Yeah.
So they could, if you don't get back by the date you're supposed to get back, they go and look for the boat and so on and so forth. In fact, if they went to get you and all that. So that's how, because I'll tell you, by the several stories about in French Guiana where I was tied up in a tree, but the one about the Galapagos was that if you are there for 4 weeks and all your water, the amount of water left is so minimal, and you're waiting for a boat, you can hear that boat coming from a long, like a day before it reaches you, but you could hear it because there's nothing there.
Right.
And you can just hear that sound coming.
That's
And you think but it's not near. I mean, it's like, 14 hours before it gets to you, but you can hear it.
Jeez, that's incredible.
And so you wait. Once you hear that sound, then as it gets closer, you hear it closer and closer. Yeah.
So, what was the human settlements like in the Galapagos in the early 70s?
None.
I was there last year.
Yeah.
And Santa Cruz and San Cristobal all have respectable towns now, and like there wasn't any of that back then.
No, there was none. There were only the settlers were the ones who were there originally, the Angermeyers, and all the people who lived, the Germans who had settled there. And then there were some Ecuadorians who worked for the park, for the national park, and worked for the Darwin station. And then there were some people who serviced, because the boats that came in at that time were not tourist boats. It were yachts that were expensive yachts that were coming through the Galapagos because they came through the Panama Canal or they did this. They weren't big boats coming with people. They weren't tourists in that way. Tourists started coming in from Quito or Guayaquil. They didn't come in boats. They started flying in. That's how we went to the Galapagos. We flew in. In the beginning, we used to fly in from Guayaquil, and then later on, we flew in from Quito. And but then the boats started coming, small, not big boats, but people who would come fly into the Galapagos and then fly into Baltra and then get in the boat and tour the islands. Yeah. But they were limited to what they could tour at that time. You couldn't go to some islands and stuff. As the park opened and more, as it got, they started getting the tourist money to manage the park and all of that. So we have a lot of it didn't go into the black hole in Quito, the government, the money, because it was substantial money.
Yeah.
But it was supposed to manage the Galapagos Islands. And a lot of it did. When Galapagos got really on the map, so to speak, where people started going, that's when all the tours started, all the big boats started, and it just increased to where, I don't know where it is now. I haven't been there for several years, so I don't know. The last time but Peter never wanted a big boat. Whenever we went, well, in the beginning it was just fishing boats. We were in fishing boats with no toilets, no nothing. I used to always say how convenient it was when you're on a boat with no toilet, because you could just go over the side.
Yeah.
Very handy. But for a woman, the only woman on the boat, it's a whole different story. But it's go over to that side while I have my butt over the water, everybody look over that way. I mean, it was I tell you, it was quite a thing, because I would always be the only female on the boat, and I would just be so jealous of these guys, like, oh, take a peek,
Yeah.
But anyway, the on fishing boats, we had two guys that we went with. The captain. And then the guy was called Coca-Cola, who captained our boat. And it was just a chuk. Sebastian would be there. You couldn't go down because the engine oil would make you seasick. Mm-hmm. So you had to stay up all the time. It was cold and windy. I had a little bassinet for Sebastian, and I used to put a blanket over him. And I always kept him up top. And it would take us 2-3 days to get to some of the islands. Sometimes it's just, if it's close, it's a day. If it's a long way, it's 3 days. And you just eat your food, lay on the boat until you get there. Chuk all the way. At night, chuk. I mean, it was incredible. You didn't stop until you got to the island. There was no stopping at one. It was just from Baltra. I mean, from Santa Cruz. From Santa Cruz to wherever you were going. Yeah. That was it. And then we carried everything with us, and we're left and say bye and hope no radio, no nothing. No.
How small are these fishing boats?
Small.
Very small?
It carried maybe 6 people.
Oh, okay. Wow. Yeah, that's tiny.
Yeah. In fact, we had to carry, maybe it could probably stretch to 10 with if you really pack it in. One time when we had a sinking boat, we had gone to, I don't remember which island we're coming from. I'm afraid I'm old now. I don't remember all the islands. We're coming from one island, and there was a photographic group from filming for, what's the magazine? Esquire.
Okay.
And they had a model who had gone with them. And there was all this equipment and stuff and whatnot. And they were in an island. They were in Hood, because there's a blowhole. Yeah. And the girl had gone when they were filming blowhole, and she had been in the air and fell down and broke all of her front teeth.
Wow.
That's
And we went, so we got to Hood, and they were there, and we were doing things at Hood, and their boat didn't come back for them. So we had to take them. So this boat, which would carry 8, had 14 on it, okay, with all their equipment. And the girl with no and the swollen face, trying to get her back to the place. Anyway, baby, because it was in the hole. So I was going, and I just saw all this water. And I came up and I said, boat's leaking. And I told Coca-Cola, he's Bible.
It always makes you feel good when
resort to the Bible.
This is the captain. And I went and Peter was off. But the way he got rid of it was he just went and slept on any trip that was going on, unless something was happening. If you called him out to see something, he'd wake up. Otherwise, he was just sleeping in there with Sebastian. So I went and woke up and said, "King," and he said, "Well, what can I do?" And then eventually he came up to say, "Where are we? What's happening?" And all this poor girl was, everybody on the ship, all the photographers, all they were concerned about was their equipment.
Oh,
It was like, oh my God, we got all this equipment. And then they did the weirdest thing I'd ever seen anybody do, or I still can't comprehend it. He started making the hole bigger. The captain. Because some way of patching it where it needed to be bigger. I couldn't figure out the logic.
You think you wanted to seal fate faster?
Yeah.
And he was there, and we were all saying, "What you doing?" And he was saying, "Yeah, you need, because he had this thing and was going to fit him to the hole." It made no sense to me. But the water was still coming in. People were bailing. Around. Everybody had a bucket, and they were bailing. And then we started seeing another boat because it was night time. And the other boat told us they'll put a rope on and try and drag us. The rope didn't work.
No,
but they said they'll follow us, So because they couldn't take us all on, their boat was even smaller.
Yeah, that boat will sink, right?
Yeah. But they said they'd follow us, and then we started seeing lights. So we knew we were getting. So the whole point was to get island wherever it was, and I don't know when it was, but we saw lights, and it might have been Santa Cruz, I don't know. But anyway, we finally, still bailing water, got to shore. That was one of the sinking ship adventures. Had many all over the world, but that was one of them. Yeah.
Nice.
Yeah, not many people can say they've been in a sinking boat.
I've been in.
That is just, it's incredible. I mean, it's one thing that's interesting to me too is just how calm Peter seemed to be, but then also just traveling together as a family, and your background in sort of the networking, business, and communication sort of. I mean, I had an experience in Costa Rica. I stayed in Oceanal for a week on my own, and it sometimes is like making good memories can be not so good times at the moment because there's so much going on, and you've got to communicate with people, and it can be, if there's a language barrier, that can be hard. There's so many little nuanced things that you have to deal with. How did you navigate a lot of these situations all over the world where you don't speak the same language as the people you're with, or there's different, like, how did you figure those things out?
Well, one good thing was Peter spoke several languages. He spoke French and Spanish and some German. So when we were in French and Spanish countries, it was okay. I didn't even have to worry. But generally, meeting different people, it was really funny. Peter had a Piper effect, as I said, with people. Always, he treated everybody the same, whether the King of England or whether the garbage man. He treated everybody exactly. There's the only person I know that never changed in any way with whom he's speaking. I mean, the conversation may be different in a way, but even the level of conversation. And he did the same thing with kids. He never spoke down to kids. he talked to kids as if they were grown-ups all the time. When they were 3 and 4, people used to think they were midgets because their conversation was not childlike at all. I mean, Sebastian was reading Moby Dick, the book Moby Dick, when he was 4. The book.
Okay.
People thought it was the children. They kept saying, "So you're reading children's Moby Dick?" And he said, and Sebastian, "What's that?" I mean, he didn't know what a children's book was, But anyway, so Peter had this thing. So in answer to that question, it wasn't always easy. We had several situations that were extremely difficult,
Right.
in terms of dealing with the culture and so on and so forth and whatnot. One in particular I'll tell you about that had me, but the problem involved me, was when we were in Madagascar one time. We had to go to a very remote village where they didn't see a lot of people outside of there. People didn't visit it. It was very remote.
Yes.
And we went. Peter was looking for tortoise shells, which he found because they ate them. And they didn't see it. And apparently it was one of the things you have to do a lot of these African places and stuff is you have to go meet the village elder first,
Right.
whoever's in charge and chat with it. So he went to meet who was the king. He was called the king. And he went to meet him and stuff. And the guy was very suspicious. And all the little children had not seen somebody like Peter before, this French guy we were with. And so all sort of ran shouting, "Vasa, Vasa," which is devil.
Yeah.
When they saw Peter. So he had to encourage them to talk to him or something. He'd give them cookies and stuff. And it was so endearing because one little girl came to her in French, "Merci, Vasa."
That is funny.
I mean, the stories are just so amazing.
They are, yeah.
But anyway, in this particular case, this chief or whatever he was, he had like lots of wives, and one of his wives had left that day on a boat, and apparently she'd sort of like escaped.
Mhm.
And so Peter went off with one of our volunteers who was, in fact, she's head of the sea turtle thing in Washington right now.
Oh.
She went off to look for bones. Peter said, "Keep them engaged and check their garbage piles to see if I could find any bones." So they went off to check the garbage piles for bones of tortoises, and I was left with this French guy and the chief, and he was sitting on a throne. I mean, in this little hut. And you should see this elaborate throne.
Oh, yes.
And I was sitting in this chair, this sort of very fancy chair, and the guy was sitting next to me. And he just, for like 15 minutes, just staring at me. Just staring like that. No, nothing. And the French guy was getting very nervous. And he was saying, "I'm not sure this is going well, Sibille. Something is happening here." And he had decided that he wanted me to be his next wife because the one had disappeared.
Oh man.
And so he finally told the guy in French, he could speak French, this guy. He finally told the guy in French that, that he wants to barter.
Oh, Jesus.
And so I said, "Well, go get Peter." And Peter, they can't find him. He's off somewhere. And I was getting nervous because the French guy was getting, because he said, "We may have to leave you here or else you won't get out for here."
Yeah.
And so he started talking in French and so on and so forth. I understood some of what they were saying because I understand some French, but I didn't know what to say. I was just nervous as hell. And he would just, he didn't do anything other than just sit and look with this intense look in his eyes. And finally, this was the part that got me. He asked the guy, "How many the animals, whatever the name of it is,
Zebu, yeah.
Zebu."
Yeah.
He said, "How many Zebu does she have?" She doesn't have any Zebu. Then he said, no, doesn't work.
There you go. I guess
That's what got me out of it.
yeah, that's one way.
He had to barter with Zebu.
Yeah.
And since I had no Zebu, I wouldn't do. And that was music to my ears.
Yeah. That's
When we told Peter said, "Oh, we should have brought some Zebu with us."
oh man.
See how much you're worth.
Wow. That's hilarious.
Yeah.
Dang. that is just the stories are incredible. I mean, so you mentioned that early on you had sort of that circuit that you would do, the Galapagos, Guyana and such,
Mhm.
and then it became more and more projects.
Mhm.
Why did it expand out, and what were some of the trips to Asia and Africa like?
Yeah, but Peter started getting interested in sea turtles and turtles generally, tortoises and so on generally, in all the countries that he could possibly, but they probably were. So people started writing to him from different universities and stuff. He'd go give lectures and so on and so forth, and that's how it started getting expanded.
Okay.
And then when he got there, he'd find out who's the researcher working on this, and then he would start working with them and so on and so forth. And India a lot, and then also because a lot of the students to us, and so he'd go back and look at their projects, and so they had a lot of projects that were India, Sri Lanka, a lot of Africa, the Madagascar, China, Japan, um, Vietnam, and things. So it started going around, and of course, he did a lot of work in Venezuela and South American countries for his book when he was doing Turtles of Venezuela.
Mhm.
I was with him on all of those trips. So most of them, not all, most of them. And so we used to spend a lot of time in Venezuela as well when he was there. So yes, so the early lives of my kids, that when I stopped going as much was when the kids got to, while they were in middle school, we could take them out of school and just get the work sent to us. They did their work because they were in private school.
Right.
So they did their work, and they would come back. And so, but when as they got older, it was more difficult to keep them out of school. Then I started staying back more and only going when they were not in school. I started staying back a lot more. But until that age, they traveled us all everywhere. They went everywhere all the time.
Right. And one thing that's sort of interesting is, at least for me personally, one of the first trips I took was to Madagascar as an eighth grader. And like you mentioned, it's just the level of remoteness there and the culture there is so different than many other places. Now, having experienced traveling in Central America and some other places, I have more to compare to, and that experience was just at a different level in terms of being out there. And I'm curious, just in your travels around Africa, what it was like learning from different African cultures and what you sort of took away from that.
Well, it certainly is different, and the experiences were different, but it was also just wonderful because you assume people always all want the same thing, but they do it in different ways. And I've had incredible experiences all over with different tribes and different kinds of people and so on. Some of them, the stories are absolutely unbelievable, and I have a lot with children, experiences with children as well. And of course, the one I just told you about, the king
Right.
in Africa, which was good. Also, there is one story in Madagascar to tell you about that turned out to be good in the end, but was sort of a little frightening. Well, there are two stories in Madagascar. One of them was when Peter got sick, very, very sick. We had rented a car with a driver to take us. He wanted to go to some very rare places, and as we were going there, we had bottled water with us, and the driver had his own water. Peter was in the front seat, and at some point during the trip, the driver took his water from the rivers and stuff. And Peter had, of course, at some point, the two bottles were in the same place, and Peter took up the driver's bottle of water and drank it.
Oh.
And he got cholera.
Oh man.
And he was so sick, and it came on very, very quickly. We had I was with another person was with us, this young woman who, as I told you she went to Madagascar. This was her first trip outside of the U.S., and she went to Madagascar with us. And she was a student at university. And the two of us there, he started getting a fever. And when Peter gets fevers, he normally doesn't get sick, and didn't get sick. And when he got a fever, it really spiked very high, and then he would just sweat it out, just like that. But this one, we got to the resort where we were going to stay, and we got him in there, and he was totally and completely lifeless. Couldn't get up, couldn't move. And we had gone through a storm where everything we had been soaked. And I had a bag of medicines I always take. I have a doctor. He always calls me, he always says Sibille and her posse. So he describes getting me my drugs. But I always take things from the country that I'm going. He always would look it up and see what kinds of diseases and stuff they have there. And he'd give me drugs to combat that if it happens. Mm-hmm. And so he had given me this pill. Well, first of all the labels of all the bottles had washed off in the storm. Oh, no. So I didn't know which was which, except for this one bottle where the pill that he gave me was the size of it was huge. And he told me when he gave it to me, he said, this is an antibiotic that's come on the market, it's trial, and it will take care of anything. But you only take one. You don't take 5 like you do with a normal dose or whatever. You just take one. And so I thought, should I just try this? And what we were doing, what the girl and I were doing, we were taking wet towels and wet sheets and just throwing cold water on his body all evening, just to try and keep him cool down because he was so hot. And he wasn't delirious, but he was completely out of it. And eventually I gave him this pill, and guess what? The pill worked.
Oh, wow.
After 2 days, he got up, but this is typical Peter. He had gone there to look for this tiny little tortoise that lives in the sand that nobody could ever see because it's so small, and this is the only habitat in the world that it lives, and blah, 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 blah. And bloody hell, if he did not get up with the whole sheet and everything around him and started walking slowly outside into the sand looking for this tortoise. And he found it.
Oh, geez.
Only because he was walking so slowly. That's why he saw it. If he was going at his normal pace, he would never have seen it. Wow. But because this was not a pace for him, he was looking down, and he found it. And so that was a huge deal. He cholera, what, he didn't care. He found this tortoise. And I wish I knew the name, but I remember it because it was so tiny, and apparently it doesn't grow any bigger than that. And it's found in Madagascar, only in Madagascar. And it's a kind of tortoise, very, very small. And anyway, so he found it. But that was one experience. That was very scary with that because, he really was completely out of it, completely. And there was no doctor or anything to take him to there. We were at this little resort on the edge of Madagascar somewhere, but anyway, run by an Italian. I remember that.
I had a similar experience in Madagascar with getting really sick, and I had 105-degree fever. I think it's like someone when the
that was probably what he had too.
Yeah, it was similar, and one of the doctors that I got treated in South Africa.
Yeah.
And the doctor came in and said, "This is just it's initiation essentially.
Oh, really?
That you have to get sick at some point, and that's how you know you're an adventurer, I guess."
Yeah. This wasn't his first time though.
Yeah, well, I'm sure there.
In Madagascar, but he did get maybe. But we knew it was the water.
Right.
We knew that. Yeah.
Yeah, that was when the person we're staying with while we were here. Because I've been in Costa Rica so long, she offered me the tap water, and I just on autopilot asked if it was potable. And it's like, oh well, yeah, it is here, but you get used to just thinking I don't know if I can drink this.
Yes, yeah.
So you added on later on those trips, and some of those were to Asia. Maybe you could expand upon what that was like, and.
Well, Japan, Peter was. I have to go back a little bit. Some of this stuff we did in some of these countries was filming for a series of films he made. It was called Turtle Planet.
Right. Okay.
And so I forgot some of the experiences we did were with the film crew and so on and so forth. And that was not a story because that was when we went to the Seychelles and we're going on to Aldabra, and we had a tidal wave, and that's another story. But anyway, it was like a tsunami. But in China, he was looking a lot at poaching and people eating turtles and stuff like that, and conservation. Some of these projects were conservation minded, to look to see what people were eating and so on and so forth, and what they were exporting. And we went to a lot of places in China. I just remember the Chinese markets, going to Chinese markets while he looked at all these turtles that were being sold in the markets. It was grim, because they're selling other animals as well and stuff. And of course, that was the same in Thailand and so on. I'm trying to remember. In China, we went to he had to give some lectures at universities for sea turtles. And I remember, I don't remember the place, but it was a very, very remote part of, this was in Japan, very remote part of Japan, where we went to see the fishing boats that used different things to exclude turtles, the sea turtles, from their nets and stuff. And he gave a talk at the university there. And then we went, but each trip, then we went to Hainan Island in China, where we spent a lot of time in Hainan. And that was tortoises, not sea turtles, where the professor there was a good friend of Peter's and invited him to give a talk there, a couple of talks there. In fact, there was a huge, while we were there for the first time, there was a huge tsunami that came, and they had to cancel his talk. And they decided to put it the next day. And Peter said, I don't think you should put it so quickly after, because these people have to show up after they're dealing with all this stuff. And about 500 people showed up. I mean, students from the university and so on.
Wow.
We were amazed that they came, even with all the stuff that was going on, because houses were destroyed and stuff. But on Hainan Island. But those experiences culturally, shows how resilient these people are in some ways. That they showed up, and also they most of them had read Peter's book. This is the other thing of Peter's books. I was surprised, because I never knew how many turtle people there were in the world. I thought there were just a couple, and then I realized there were thousands all over the world. Then I realized how much impact Peter's book had made all over the world, because everybody had it. The turtles of the first one, Living Turtles of the World, and. So from that, because that was the first time, everybody kept telling me, this is the first book they ever had, where it was written in a way, it was written for anybody who wanted to read about turtles. It wasn't written in a way that was totally scientific. And Peter always wrote his books that way, except for Turtles of Venezuela. All of his books, he said, I'm not preaching to the choir. I want people who would just pick up a book and find out about turtles and be interested. This is not for people who are already know about turtles. That they could have that too, but this is to encourage people. And he got some flack in the beginning from his books, because I had a lot of people, scientists, who said, "Oh, why is Peter writing all these coffee table books when he could be writing more scientific books?" Mm-hmm. And he always said, "I'm not writing it for you."
That's great. That's great.
Whenever they said that, you know what I know, so I'm not writing it for you.
Yeah, right.
That's actually really good. That's a great point.
Yeah, because he got a lot of flack for that. A lot of people used to say, you're so brilliant and so on, you should write more science. He did a lot of scientific papers, as you know, but his books, he wanted them to be more general, more storytelling, more, the turtles are part of it, but it also, is.
That's kind of how we want to do the podcast. I've told people is we want anybody to be able to enjoy listening to people talk about turtles.
Peter's books were one of the biggest influences in my life.
Exactly.
Like reading those, as a child that had no background in
Yeah,
science,
Exactly.
like that.
It
That
just
was
makes such a
amazing.
bigger. It just makes such a bigger impact when it's friendly for you to read or listen to.
Yes. Yeah.
Right. Something also, I don't know how if you were involved as much with the Rapidus in
Very
that
much so.
situation.
Oh, wonderful! I was just. I don't know if you were there when Peter had gotten the skull, but I was just very interested in the story about how he acquired that.
Yeah. Well, first of all, I'll tell you a little bit about the Rapidus story.
Of course.
Just a little bit about that, to go back a little bit. The reason why Peter got involved in Rapidus is through me. Mm-hmm. I was working, he'd gotten a letter from a professor at the university who had said that they found this turtle, so on and so forth. And then I was doing work in Vietnam for the company I worked with. We were doing hotels. Okay. And so I was over there checking out hotels and stuff. And we found, the person I worked for, my boss, was a good friend of ours, and he was also a good friend of Peter. He was also a turtle enthusiast. And the first time he went to this place, a sanctuary that had the rafters that was embalmed in there.
Right.
And then he told us about it. And so Peter was like, yes, I would. Then I went over doing work there and saw it and stuff. So when I came back, Peter said, well, the next time you're going to Vietnam, I'm coming. Because we were doing a lot of work over there. And he came. And that was when he met Hadenduk, who was the guy he was working with on the turtles, on the rafters. And he got very interested. And that's when he decided he was going to do something about it. He was actually going to go and look for rafters.
Right.
And so he went and he made arrangements with the people who were working on rafters there. And we took this trip all the way through Vietnam to the border of China, stopping at every village, talking to all the fishermen and so on and so forth. And it was fascinating because most of these old fishermen had been in the Vietnam War.
Right.
And they had been, they spoke French.
But yeah.
They didn't speak English, but they spoke French. And they had such knowledge of everything around them. But the thing about them, they were very, because of the Vietnam War and so on and so on, they wanted to show that they were very friendly.
Okay.
And there was no hostility as a result of that to white foreigners or whatever.
All right.
And so wherever you went, whenever you had to find out about them, we had to first sit with the family. We had to have tea or dinner with them first. They would bring the children out to sing for us. I mean, it became a whole cultural thing at every place we went in the village. And they absolutely loved Peter because they would bring out their little bones of turtles that they'd collected. And he would sit down for 5 seconds and then do and bring out and make it appear as the whole child. They'd go, oh, because they didn't know how to put it together.
Oh, wow. That's beautiful.
And he would show them how to do it. And sometimes he would stick it for them and give it back to them. I mean, they just absolutely. So coming to how we got the Rafferty's skull, he went to this one person who had the shell, and Peter done it for him and gave it to him. And then he said that he had a skull. Okay. And Peter was really interested in it. So Peter said, this is really, really very important because nobody's seen this. And started talking to him about it and so on. And Peter said, this you have to keep this because it's really important. It's very important to keep, and so on and so forth. And because of the science, and he explained it to him about why Rafferty's is not found. And it told him the whole thing. And then, while we were out shopping, we went to a market. He went and bought a box, a silver metal box. And he said, I'm going to take it, let's go back to that village. I'm going to give this to the guy so he can put it in there because it needs to be kept in a good way. And so he went back to the village and we went to the guy and Peter said, I brought this for you to keep your skull in. Yeah. And the guy was so amazed, he said, I want to give it to you.
Wow.
That's incredible. Oh,
and he said, I'll keep the box. And he went and got one of his wife's big jewelry boxes and put the turtle skull in it and gave it. But he kept the metal box. But he gave it to Peter.
Wow. He must have been so excited about that.
Yeah, because Peter kept telling him how it was important. And so he never asked him to give it to him. Never did. But he told him because he was waiting to see if he would give it to him.
Yeah.
But he never did. So he never did. He said, let me give him a box. And the guy just gave it to him.
Wow.
That's awesome. That's incredible.
And we had pictures. They've all gone, of course, to the Turtle Conservancy and everything. And we have pictures with the guy and him. And a lot of pictures from Vietnam. The same man who gave him the turtle. That's how we got it.
That's beautiful.
It's fascinating, yeah. So in talking about all of the travels that you went on, it's the stories are incredible. I'm curious, from your perspective, what was the most memorable moment out of all the travels? And why is it maybe the most memorable?
Well, there are a lot of memorable moments, but I'll tell you one that stands out now. This was in Turkey. We were with some friends. We were doing archaeological tour. And because the friends we were with, she was, one of the ladies was an archaeology professor at Yale. And that area was her Greece and that area was Turkey and stuff was her area of interest. So we were on a barge, we'd rented a barge, and we were floating around going to different parts to look at archaeology. And we ended up going to a part of the seacoast, a part of Turkey. I think it was something with a B. But anyway, we went there, and Peter looked over and he said, you know, that beach is got, I can see, it's a sea turtle beach, because I could see all of the things on there, the turtles coming in and out and stuff. I could see the prints. And he said, let's take they took the dinghy. He said, let's take the dinghy and go over and see it. So we all went over, and there was one young man on the beach, one. And he was walking around, excuse me, he had a notebook.
Yeah.
And he came up, and Peter said, you know, I see there's turtles here. And he said, yes, he's been the person who has been working the beach, studying the turtles there. And Peter started asking him questions about it and stuff, and he explained how the tourists are there in the day, and then at nighttime they move all the chairs back and stuff, allow the turtles to come up, and how, you know, what they do and stuff to help the turtles and stuff. And he was talking to him for quite a long time. We were standing around listening. And so Peter said, that is great, you're doing good work, and so on and so forth. Thank you so much. And then Peter looked at him and said, Peter Pritchard, to say goodbye. And the guy jumped up and threw the notebook in the air, started running up and down the beach. He said, oh my God, oh my God, oh God, Peter Pritchard. He said, I wrote to you. You're the reason why I'm doing this.
Oh my God! Wow,
That's so
It's
cool.
incredible. That is.
When he said, I wrote to you, Peter said, did I answer? He said, yes, you did.
that's amazing.
And then it gets better, the story. So years later, like when Peter was ill, maybe longer than that, maybe 8 years ago or so. Is that my fault?
That's me.
No, yeah, okay. It's about 8 years or so ago, maybe, I don't remember exactly how long ago it was. But Peter was honored at the Sea Turtle Symposium in Turkey. And the young man, who we kept in touch with and stuff, was now the head of the biology department of the university.
Wow.
The turtles. And at the opening of the ceremony, he had, you know, the president of Turkey and all these important people and stuff, university, all in the thing. And he got up and told that story, that how the reason why was that he had seen Peter on this beach, just random.
Wow.
That's
People were
amazing.
crying in the audience.
that
They were
is-
crying.
that
People
is-
were crying.
That's beautiful.
Because the way he said it, he said, this man, and he just said, Peter Pritchard, he said, I suddenly realized who it was. If he didn't say his name, if Peter hadn't said his name, he would never have known. Because he just asked him questions. He didn't say,
Right.
you know, I'm a turtle expert or anything or nothing like that.
Right.
Which he never does when he first meets people. It's only when they, you know, if they get into it, and he
Yeah.
did. But you always want to hear what they have to say. So he never tried to let them get intimidated by him being there. He'd always ask him all the questions first and then say afterwards who he is.
That's amazing. It's so insane or interesting how fate works
Yeah.
in
Yeah.
such a way, and how small the world truly can be sometimes.
That's one of them. That story remains with me because, unfortunately, by the time this all came out and stuff, he was ill. He could still understand what was going on, but it was lovely for them to give him that award. Yeah.
Yeah, through the writing. I mean, it's like all people around the globe were his students, and talking about the person in Asia that was also the head of the
Yeah,
university,
yeah.
and this person.
Yeah.
It's fascinating. I mean, to
Yeah.
see people
Yeah.
rise through there to get to those positions.
Well, I would say, without a doubt, that most of the people who are the best in their fields, in turtles in particular, but in other things too, Peter mentored in some way or other, through his books, through meeting them, through telling them something, through having them come and spend time at the Institute for months at a time. Most of the foreign people who came stayed with us for months. They didn't come for a day or two. Stayed with us for months. He had one young girl from Malaysia write a children's book on Malaysian turtles while she was at the Institute.
wow.
Wow.
Because it was a very, very interesting story. She came from a very uneducated background in the sense that both of her parents couldn't read or write. She was in Borneo, and she learned how to, she was always around, her father was a fisherman, she was always around things, she was around turtles all the time. And she tried to get into the University of Malaysia. And she managed to get a bachelor's degree, and she wanted to get a master's degree and study turtles. And when she went to do it, the person who was in charge of the program at the time, wouldn't let her. And she just didn't think she was whatever degree, whatever the reason was that he gave for not letting her in. And she met Peter. She wrote to Peter and told him the story. And Peter said, we were going to China. And Peter said, I'll pay for you to come to meet us in China, and we'll go around and look at all the Chinese turtles and stuff around while we were there. She came. And so she went with us. And all around China we were there for a month or so. And then she went back and tried to get in. She still didn't get in. And Peter said, well, come to the Institute and spend 6 months or so. We'll do this. I won't tell you, she has a PhD now. Yeah. But anyway, she came to this, and she didn't know anything really a lot about Malaysian turtles. And Peter said, this is the problem. He said, you need to learn the Malaysian. And he said, I'll tell you what you'll do. Every day you're going to learn a different one from the specimens and stuff that we have at the Institute. Yeah. So he set up all this stuff for it, and he said, we're going to write a children's book about it. Wow, so the children's book, she actually got published.
That's amazing.
Wow. And that was probably great in terms of credentials.
Yeah, and then she got a PhD. She used to call, I haven't heard from her for a couple of years, she used to call every Christmas to wish Peter Merry Christmas and stuff. But every time she called, she always said, I can't believe that I'm here because of Peter Pritchard, yeah.
It's amazing how many people he was able to touch through everything he did.
And the different ways in which he found to get them to engage. It wasn't not everybody was the same way. He found, but he said to me, she, I'm not gonna call her name. He said she needs to learn the turtles. That's the problem. She doesn't have any knowledge of them. She has knowledge of sea turtles, but she don't have any knowledge of all this sort of stuff, and she needs to learn them. But this is a good way to do it.
Yeah, it's incredible. I think it's a good transition too to talking about just who Peter was in terms of turtles. I think a lot of people know, but he also was just widely interested in many other things. And maybe you could expand upon some of his other interests and his sort of philosophy towards learning.
Well, he was a true Renaissance man. He had a photographic memory. And, he did chemistry when he was at Oxford. Right. So he had a very good knowledge of chemistry and things like that. So he was, at the beginning of his career, if you notice, when he was at Audubon, he did a lot of work on fossil fuels and things. What do you call it? The stuff they make. It's near Tampa. They have a big factory there that does it. Phosphates.
Okay.
Sorry.
No problem.
Phosphates. He did a lot of work for the Audubon on phosphates and stuff and how it affects. He did a lot of work when he was at Audubon that were chemistry related. Okay. A lot. He also started, when he was at Audubon, he started the Manatee Club. He did works on manatees.
Oh, very nice.
And he also started the Florida Panther.
Okay.
If you go through the books and find it, you'll see. He did a whole series for the University of Florida on the flora and biota of Florida. Mm-hmm. He did a whole. So those were other things outside of turtles that he did while he was working. But as hobbies and things, one of his hobbies was plants. He loved plants. He loved cycads and he loved palms in particular. And so he used to go to the Fairchild Gardens and stuff and see the cycads and palms. And when we traveled, one of the things that I used to say, there were 3 things on the list that we had to always go see, which was, one was turtles, number 1.
Yep.
One was temples, because turtles lived in temples. Mm-hmm. In those countries, they always had turtles. So the turtle temple, so we had to go to temples, because he was always looking for the turtles around the temples. And then the other ones were the plants, but the botanic gardens. Mm-hmm. So I've seen every country that has a botanic garden that I've been to. I've seen everyone, and also this cycad obsession and palm obsession. But he knew so much about it that if he went anywhere, he could identify what palms were. Archie Carr was always interested in Peter's interest in palms, because they'd go down to Costa Rica or wherever and so on, and Peter would be pointing notes. And he says, "How do you know about that?" But that was a side interest. A lot of people didn't know. He didn't write about them, but he had this interest in it. What else? What were the other things he was interested in? Of course, poetry. He was because he had a photographic memory. All of the poems he learned at school, he remember word for word. Even the ones that were 4 pages long.
Wow.
William Blake or whoever. I mean, he could recite them still even when he was old. I mean, he could still, the memory was there for all of those things.
That's very impressive.
Yeah. So and so he loved his music taste he did not like modern music. Except for Amy Winehouse, whom he adored.
Okay.
Interesting.
He was so sad when Amy Winehouse died.
Oh.
So he loved, I don't know what appealed to him about Amy Winehouse, but he just, whenever he would go to, I'd say to my machine there, I'm not going to call her name, play Amy Winehouse. He said, "Oh, good, Amy." But he liked classical music a lot, and funny enough, he loved hymns, and because he used to sing them at school when he was in boarding school, and at Oxford, and well, actually, he didn't at Oxford when he was in the choir. He was in the choir because he was a scholar. He was a demi-scholar, and because of his height, they put him to sing in the choir. But he used to tell him not to sing. Just stand there. Because he'd take everybody off. He couldn't sing a lick. But he thought he could. So if anything was playing, he has no fear. Like dance, he couldn't dance either, but he was always dancing. People would say, "Oh, Peter, please. The music is going in one direction, he's in another." But because the thing about Peter is he's not afraid to try anything.
Yeah.
I mean, and he wasn't self-conscious about it. I mean, my sons don't dance at all, and you couldn't get them to go to the dance floor if you paid them. But Peter would go on the dance floor and dance, even though he can't dance. Yeah, but I didn't think he couldn't dance. That was the difference. But yes, so music, he liked Gilbert and Sullivan. He used to play a lot of Gilbert and Sullivan. He liked Vivaldi and that kind of stuff. But he liked modern music. He had a lot of problems with. He couldn't really my kids, when they were little, my boys used to play all of these heavy metals and music and stuff, and they'd play it very loud upstairs in the house, and we'd be downstairs and be blasting out. And one way used to get him to stop. He'd never go and say, "Just turn that off," or anything. He'd just go inside and start dancing. And they would turn it off immediately. He had different ways of getting it. As soon as he started dancing, I said, "I'm coming downstairs," one after the other. Dad's up there, trying to dance to the music. No. So that, but he tolerated it, but he didn't like to go to
Yes.
So that was the kind of music he liked. What other things he liked? He loved food and loved sweet stuff. Very English that way, his hobbies were he loved building things too. He always thought he was a lot better builder than he was, but he loved he thought he was a really good DIY person, and anything he was, "I'll fix it." Of course, he ended up calling the plumber. But he always thought, he loved doing DIY stuff, loved it, and of course he had an affinity to his car. So.
That's an interesting story. Then for listeners, if you're not familiar with Tales from the Tebaid, a lot of the stories are covered. But the Rolls-Royce story, maybe you could expand upon that.
Yeah, I'll just give a little bit about it. But Peter's connection to Rolls-Royce is his great-grandfather introduced Mr. Rolls to Mr. Royce. And this was no easy feat at that time, because Royce was an aristocrat and Rolls was a mechanic. Yeah. And so never the twain shall meet. But Peter's great-grandfather was an inventor and did a lot of stuff as well. Very interesting things. He worked with Edison and all kinds of people. Wow. But anyway, he decided he was very interested in motorsports and cars and things, and he knew Rolls very well, and he knew Royce very well. And so he knew Royce could build good engines, and he knew Rolls was very interested in having a luxury car. And so he put them together, and there are books about him. It's called The Godfather of Rolls. It's Henry Edmonds. His name is Henry Edmonds. And so there are actually books written about him and what he did and stuff, because he was pretty much his reason. He owned the first Rolls Royce that they ever built.
Oh, wow.
So, So Peter acquired this Rolls, And not to get into too much things about it, it's absolutely beautiful. It's a 1957 Silver Cloud, and it's beautiful. And of course, he drove it everywhere, including picking up the Christmas tree at Home Depot and putting it on top. You know, people would be amused. He'd go to the store and buy an air conditioner, and where does it go? The box goes on top of the rolls. He didn't care. But one of the more interesting stories was that he loved the car. But one time he was at the grocery store, and he came out, and there was a young woman and her mother looking at the car, and Peter came out, and she said, "Oh, we love this car." And Peter said, "Yeah, it's mine." And she said, "I wish we could use it for her wedding." This was an African American young woman, and Peter said, "Yeah, when is your wedding?" And the woman said, "Like in a month. It's in Sanford, which is an area not far from where we live." And Peter said, "Well, I could drive if you like." And the woman said, "Would you?" She didn't believe him, and he said, "Yeah, give me your address and we'll talk about it." And he did.
Wow.
He got dressed up and he drove and picked up the girl and took her to her wedding. He was the only, I have to tell you, he did tell me this, he was the only person there who was, he was the only white person at the wedding. And he was the driver of the car.
That's funny.
But it was very fun. But he loved it. I mean, that's the sort of thing he would do because he thought the car had its own sort of life.
Yeah.
But the number of times that whenever he went, because the amount of jokes that we had driving the car, people would roll the window down and said, "Do you have any Grey Poupon?" You know, because that was, you remember the ad about Grey Poupon? You all might be too young to
Yeah,
remember.
I think so. But
There was an ad where the guy was in a Rolls Royce. There was an ad for Grey Poupon, which is a mustard.
Okay.
And they would ask that because it was like the best, the Rolls Royce of birth.
That's funny.
But people used to always ask us that. And then the other thing was very funny. Whenever we went through the toll booth, the wheel was on the other side of the car. You know, the wheel is on the right? Mm-hmm. The Americans' cars are on the left. Which was it?
The
American car. Yeah, it's on the right.
Yeah.
Okay. So when you went through the toll booth, it was too far to reach to throw in the money at the time. At that time you didn't have all the e-pass things. And so he made a long stick with a little thing at the end, like a little basket. Rick put the money in and shove it. She give it to the woman. He made this thing. And so they used,
way to do it.
yeah, it was very funny. He had this thing he would push out to pay it for the tolls. And the people got to know him so well. They would just let him go through. They let them take the money. But so he loved doing things like that, you know. So he loved it. I still have the car, yeah. So that was another part of his eccentricity. He would drive the Rolls Royce to meetings at the turtle meetings, different places, and carry lots of people who drives in it and so on. They loved it. So it had its own little cultural life. The Rolls.
That's really cool. So maybe we can transition a bit into talking about the Institute and how that began, because there was I think a lot of people know Dr. Pritchard for his work with the Institute and such, but there was a lot before that we've covered. But what were your initial thoughts when he came to you with the idea of starting an institute, and how did what were you feeling?
I was very happy because all of the stuff was in my attic.
There you go.
We had, thousands of and people came all the time to stay with us, and then they'd go up in the attic and study things and so on. We had people from all over the world that used to come to our house before the Institute, tons of them. And so I was very happy when he decided to do that. He decided to just concentrate on turtles, because he worked at Audubon, and he was doing turtles, but he was also doing other things, and he just decided he just wanted to just do turtles. And so they started it, and then it became, it really was really interesting, because the real opening, we opened it, I don't remember what year it was that we opened it, the building. It was originally not in the building it is now. Well, it's no longer there, but it was in the building next door before. And then then we got this other building it became the Institute for years and years, the Chelonian Research Institute. And it was amazing because Peter did it was so good for him because he did a lot of his work. We lived right across the road. So he could go over there any time of the night. He would often, when he was doing his writing of a lot of his books, he would go over about 9 or 10 o'clock after dinner and just come in at 1 or 2 o'clock just from writing. That's when he would do it.
Wow.
So it was really convenient, but it became obviously a very important scientific museum for the study of turtles and conservation of turtles. That was very good. One of the most important visitors at the Institute, which I think you'd love to hear about, was Ernst Mayr.
Yes.
And he was I adored him. And at that time, he was probably in his 80s when he first started coming. He died like at 99, maybe late 80s when he started coming. He wintered in Winter Park. He used to stay at the hotel in Winter Park. And then eventually he used to give some lectures at Rollins College in the winter. And that's how Peter got to know him. Peter had met him before at Harvard, but when he really got to know him was when Ernst decided he wanted to come. So Ernst was very fond of me. So he liked me to cook for him and stuff. So I would make, he was allergic, the only thing he was allergic to was chocolate. He was very allergic to chocolate. So that was the one thing which he didn't like. But he, and he only drank red wine, didn't drink white wine. But he came and he would spend lots of times and talk about encyclopedic mind. I've never met anybody in my life whose memory was so good. I mean, at his age, it was in his 80s, from way back, from when he worked with the Rothschild, from when he worked in Papua New Guinea with birds, when he, all this stuff. I mean, it was unbelievable, his knowledge. And so we used to sit down and just listen to him, because he loved to tell stories too. And it was just, the friendship between him and Peter were just wonderful. He absolutely adored Peter and Peter him. And one of the things I thought was the funniest of all was when they had this big cladistics controversy. And Peter was on the other side of it. Everybody was on the cladistics bandwagon. Peter was not. And he got into this huge intellectual argument in some magazine or something with various people on cladistics. And, Peter's, as he does, saying exactly what he thought, and people were sort of hammering that he was wrong and so on and so forth. And then Ernst said, "You're absolutely right," to Peter. I'm good. He believed it. He agreed with him. Yeah. Okay, so that was Peter's trump card.
Yeah.
Ernst Mayr edited my paper. This is what he had to say. This is what he had to say in the remarks. I think it closed it down after a while. But yeah, so Ernst was, because I remember Ernst saying, "Oh yeah, Peter, you need to get in that argument. No. Let's do something about this." Yeah, it was funny.
That's really fascinating. I mean, he had such an impact on the development of an argument that's still going with phylogenetics.
Yeah.
And in terms of people that pass through the Institute, I mean, that's one person, obviously, in terms of sort of came to fame through biology. But there must have been a lot of other interesting characters.
Oh, yes. Yeah. We had a lot of people who came through, whether it was Buddhist people. Peter at one point was giving lectures to Buddhism, not about Buddhism, but about nature to, biology to the Buddhist group. He did it in Atlanta and New York. And here, they asked him and he did it. And so we had people like that who came through. We had the president of the prime minister of Guyana, the president of Guyana, who came through. And I can't remember, but we had some celebrities who came through. Then of course we had the top people in conservation who always came and was good friends with him. Russ Mittermeier, for example, people like that. So yes, I just can't. Unfortunately, we have 2 books of people signed. We signed it, and I sent them up to the Turtle Conservancy with all the stuff but that will give you a good record of all the people who were there. There were really quite a lot of people. I can't remember specific names other than Ernst right now, but there were a lot.
Yeah, it's so many that it's tough, right? I'm also curious too what the selection criteria and how Dr. Pritchard figured out who would work at the Institute. Scott Thompson was someone who curated, and he's been on our podcast 4 times. He's just super supportive and just a genius in terms of turtles.
Peter wanted somebody who was really into taxonomy.
Okay.
And when he chose Scott for that. When he decided he was going to have all of the turtles cataloged and so on and so forth. He wanted somebody who really, and Scott, in his words, was the best taxonomist in turtle taxonomist.
Yeah.
And so he came. He lived with us for a couple of years, on and off, 6 months back, 6 months, and did the work. Did all the work for the taxonomy of all the specimens we had. So yes, I haven't been in touch with Scott lately, but after he went to Brazil, but he does. He's very knowledgeable, very very, and so that's how Scott came to do that. Yeah. But other people who came through, he didn't really choose anybody. People just sort of said, "Could I come?"
Right.
That was seriously. People just said, and he said, "Fine." I mean, Peter was so trusting of people. I'll tell you this: a lot of other biologists, friends of ours, were not too happy with the fact he did this, but he never locked up anything, any of his specimens. Anybody who wanted to come and see it, they could see it. We left the country, left people staying there, and never said to them. He just trusted everybody, and that trust worked out because people didn't steal things.
Yeah.
It just worked out. And so we used to get people, "Oh, Peter, you got this important thing. How do you buy it? Do you not put it away?" He didn't. And I think part of the reason is the same reason we didn't lock our house for 40 years. I lock it now. Is Peter always sort of, I don't know, he had this side of him that he always gave the better argument to humanity. He always did. He just always felt that people were their best selves. And I think that's why he was so permissive and never felt like he owned anything.
Yeah.
Of certain things he was a little bit particular about, but not to be completely. But generally, he just didn't. He felt like it belonged to everybody. It was interesting because I was not like that at all. What belonged to me, in terms of how I looked at things. And I used to say to him all the time, "I can't believe we leave everything unlocked. We go away for 3 months in the place." Never bothered about it. Now, of course, you have to. I mean, the world has also changed in terms of what you do with your place. I lock my doors all the time. I never used to, as I said, for 40 years.
Yeah. The CRI was like the greatest gateway to the turtle world, especially for any young and up and coming person with interest in turtles. And it's I mean, we were like the last generation that really got to experience that.
We were extremely lucky in that respect.
Yeah, that's true. The year, I'll tell you when we had a lot of people who came. When Peter was awarded given the honor by Time Magazine in 2000, and there's a joke about that, which I'll tell you. We had a big party for that thing, and the mayors and the governor they all came, and that was when, to me, the institute was shown to the community here how important it was for this community. Because later on, they had a picture of Peter up at the airport, welcome as a hometown hero, welcome to Orlando and stuff like that. That's because the institute became something important to the community. And that was people didn't realize how much it meant. And that party, when Peter got the thing, people were there, I realized how much it was valued as a resource in terms of what it presented for Oviedo, because people didn't expect something like that here. It was quiet and under the radar to some extent, but people who knew, it was quite something. And they always said, "How come this is in Oviedo?" They always said that. But but the story I was going to tell you when Peter got the award, the Time Magazine, we were having dinner at a table in what I call the Blue House or other house. And the phone rang. It was about 7:30 or so. The phone rang and Peter answered it, and he came back looking like, the cat who had the milk. He looked very happy, and he said, "You won't believe who just called me." And he said, "Who?" And he said, "It was Time Magazine." He said, "They're going to name me as one of the heroes of the planet." And my son Dominic, who was sitting there, said, "Which planet?"
That's funny.
Which planet?
It was so funny. Peter always said, "I brought you down to earth immediately." Just without batting him, he said, "Which planet?"
Yeah, quick. That was pretty witty, right?
Yeah, that's a good one.
So that was a funny story.
Yeah, that is really interesting. I'm curious for sort of actually talking about just some of the leaders that have passed through here and such. One thing that's just interesting to me is you guys have interacted with presidents in the past and such. I'm curious what that's like, because that's got to be a really interesting experience all around.
Yeah, well, Peter was an advisor to the president of Costa Rica for a while, who won the Nobel Prize eventually. But anyway, he was there. So he had what I should say that one of the reasons for this was he didn't believe in confrontation with people who didn't agree with him, like the people who were killing the turtles. He believed that they needed to be educated, they needed to be changed. And one of the ways of doing this was to find out what their personal interest was and so on. Quite often, the way he got people to change was through the younger people, their children or so on, who would see a turtle and be much more sympathetic than the person who's getting it for food. And he did this very well in Guyana over the years with the poaching of turtles. They used to kill a lot of leatherbacks, a lot, but all kinds of turtles, and on the beaches. And so Peter started working with the villages in the schools, bringing the schools out with the teachers to see their nesting and stuff. And these kids would be so taken with that. And he would explain to them that it's okay to take some eggs to eat and so on and so forth. But if you take all the eggs, then you never get any more turtles. So he started teaching them about conservation that way. So he was, in fact, in the beginning, he was criticized for it by not coming out and saying right away, this is wrong, that you shouldn't do it. And his argument was always, if you can go to Publix and roll your supermarket basket and get food, you're good. But if somebody's in there and is hungry and they see a turtle egg or something, or a turtle that they could eat because they need it, the only way you could change it is if you give them an alternative. And so he believed it. So he did in Guyana. He had them do pig farming. He had them do chicken farming, all kinds of things. He brought vets from here to teach them how to do these things so they could get all the protein and not go kill turtles. And so because of that, he started in other countries interacting. This started going around in other places. And that's how he ended up doing it in Costa Rica. In other countries, he was advising how they could save the turtles, whether it be sea turtles or whether it be tortoises. It was, you had to get into their head where you get on their side. Let them understand that if this is a resource and you want to have it forever, then you can't kill every last one. And then the kids, he was teaching them that you don't have to kill the turtle. You could actually get something else to eat that tastes just as good. So he started. That's how he did it, and now it worked, and it worked in a lot of countries. And his program again is the most successful conservation program that's been continued since he's been doing it since '66 when he first went there, and it's continued, still going on. And now they do satellite tagging, of course. They tag the turtles to see where they go. They're learning. Mostly now it's just science. But in the beginning, it was also teaching them how to and in fact, the people who are doing the work in Ghana now are Guyanese who learned on the beach. The people who come over to help them are the ones who know how to operate the satellites and stuff, those sides. But the people who are actually working are which is what he always said should happen eventually. If they feel responsible for what they're doing, then they'll take more interest in conserving and not just killing everything. But so he was always a person who felt you should talk to the people. That's how he got them to it was a very weird sort of way in which to do it, but it worked in the end. When he first started going to Guyana, and he would tag turtles, and then people would come and kill them on the other side, and he would see them. And there were two sides. While he tagged them, they killed it. And he said this has got to stop because they're killing the turtles I tagged when they come up, not the same time, but when they come up at a different time. So what he did was essentially he started buying the eggs from them. So they would steal the eggs and so on. And he'd say, for every egg, I'll give you so much and so much. And he'd knowing fully well that when he wasn't there, they'd probably go and get the eggs. But he wanted them to see it had a value. But the value wasn't his value wasn't to eat it. His value was to save it. Because he wasn't eating them. Whereas when they sold it at the market, people were eating them. And they thought he was nuts that he was buying turtles to save. Yeah. But then they started to understand the process. And that they needed not to take all the eggs. And maybe just take one set tonight, but don't take, every turtle that comes up. And eventually it worked. So that in itself was the way he went to different countries doing conservation in that way. And then people started picking up the same process of talking to the enemy, in other words, the person who was not on the side of the turtle, and getting them to come around to your side, not by telling them it was outright bad, but trying to tell them that if they did it a different way, they could get a good result, the same result. And that was what he did for a long time. But I remember the number of times that Peter was ridiculed for taking the side of what they called, the poachers or so on. But he wasn't really, he was just trying to get them to understand. He realized it would only be long term if they came around to his way of thinking rather than thinking you're changing them.
Yeah.
So it was, his philosophy in conservation was really, really good. And I saw, over the years, a lot of the things he told people in the beginning that they didn't agree with come to pass where they're doing it now. I saw that happen over and over and over again. Over and over again, where I think, when Peter was telling that, they were sort of like, oh, what's he talking about now? He's sort of joined the bad side or something, and
Yeah, just very selfless too, to a certain extent. I think a lot of people have ideas and need to defend their ego, and you make enemies. But that if you want change, you've got to step in the shoes of those people.
Yeah,
and provide
especially when if they're just doing it for sport, it's a different thing.
Yeah, right.
I mean, killing elephants and that's a different thing. But if you're doing it because this is what you need to eat, or this is how you have to make your money to eat, then it's a whole different wavelength. You have to think differently then. And I think he did a lot of that, and he was very good. And so he became friends with all these people. Mm-hmm. They became friends with him. I mean, and the same thing. And he did a lot of the thing he did in Florida a lot was when they were passing legislation to save turtles in Florida. He often went to Tallahassee and spoke on behalf. He did that a lot and spoke on behalf of the turtle lobby and so on and so forth. And he always won. And so the shrimp lobby used to say, whenever they had anything, could we keep Pritchard out of it? That was their thing, because once he went up there, it was over.
And was that his ability to win the arguments? Was that just his ability to bring facts or persuasion or all?
And to show that he's also being on the other side, being on their side. It's like you will actually yield more if these nets were done in a way where you didn't have to throw out everything that you caught, which takes all your time and so on and so forth. You catch more shrimp if you have this thing that keeps things out rather than. I mean, so he would be on their side in a way, and so you always won the argument. He would look at the side that they're on and see how it could be advantageous to them, and then he'd come back and say, "Oh, those damn shrimp people,"
Yeah, just all around.
But he'd find a way to which it could sound like it benefits them, and often it does. But he would make that argument, and I think that was always the thing. He always can see both sides. Now, when he really had to be fair, when he really had to be strict about things, he did. When he thought there was no alternative. He was very, thing about that. If he saw people just hacking turtles to death when they were doing it in Oaxaca and stuff like that, he was very, very tough on that. Until, he got through to the guy, through the children. When she said, "Daddy, stop killing all those turtles." When she saw the mound of shells. But, so...
In terms of the Institute, what's maybe the most standout memory that you have from something that may be funny or just the most interesting thing that happened at the Institute? I mean, there's so much that's got to be.
God, I can't remember.
Yeah.
It's hard. It's hard for me to think of a specific thing now at the Institute because, as you said, there were so many things happening all the time. I don't know. I can't think of anything specific. I'm sorry.
If it helps, I remember Chelsea telling us a story about how I believe she was somewhere from Eastern Europe. A student had come over and had for some reason decided to draw on the shells.
Yeah. She wasn't a student. She was a professor.
Oh, she was a professor.
And she was from Russia.
Uh-huh.
Well, not Russia itself, but one of the
Soviet
colonies. Yeah. Oh, yeah. that was quite something. Apparently, she did it other places too.
Oh.
And she was,
Through all their therapists,
we let Elena, no last name. She was a very well-known scientist, turtle specialist. And she came and stayed with us a couple of times. The first, she came one time where she was there she used to live up in the attic at that time. Because the one thing I remember that's very funny about her, she was, there were two things. She didn't like lights because she wasn't used to lights. To bright lights. So she would be up in the attic looking at all these specimens with a little light on. And we would go and turn the lights on and she would say no. She was just used to this small light. And anyway, we were going to the Galapagos one time. She came to stay and Peter left her there alone. We came back and we had all these, you can't get it out.
Yeah.
He had all these shells marked with a marker.
So she did that when you guys weren't here.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And she'd sort of outlined them all. Don't know why she was doing this, but quite a lot of them.
Yeah.
Peter was furious.
When we were packing up the
remember
CRI,
seeing
we
them.
were seeing them everywhere.
Yeah.
Did like the sutures. In
Yes,
just a weird
I don't know
way.
why she did, but she did not amuse him. She was banned from Australia because of it.
Wow.
Don't know what she was doing, why. But yeah, that was a weird.
Yeah, that's interesting.
That's one time when you shouldn't leave somebody alone.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
That was a good example of that.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, it needs some supervision.
Yeah.
I guess we can sort of maybe wind things down and just to get to broader questions
Okay.
and your perspective on certain things. Well, I'm curious, and we're all curious what currently, because you've got such a wide range of experience and knowledge, what you think the biggest global issue, and perhaps it's synonymous with or different than the biggest environmental issue is, and maybe how we go about fixing that.
Well, climate change to me is the biggest global issue. Although I learned the other day that AI is even bigger than climate change. So I think those two are battling. I'll tell you one of the things that going back to Peter's thing, he always thought that people, and this was years ago, and I'll give you an example of that. He always, well, it's good and bad. He always thought that people should adapt to what's going on, and because, in other words, he was doing climate change long before climate. He believed in being not being oblivious to what the weather, the land, or anything is telling you. And I'll give you an example of that. In Guyana, the beach is a changing beach all the time, fluctuates. I mean, one year it's in this place, next way it's not there anymore, it's in this place. And this was going on for years. And Peter always said it was the way that the tide came in and all that, and it would be washed away. So he always, whenever he went to a new place, you'd have to find a new beach, he always made it very temporary. Never wanted anything permanent because it might not be there the next year, and so on and so forth. And an example of that was one time we were going to French Guiana. There were three of us. There was a Dutch scientist, very tall Dutch scientist named Boo, and myself and Peter. And we were going. We had a village. We had this beach in French Guiana, which was very remote as well. You had to pass through. You went through Suriname, and you went through Devil's Island and all that to pass it to get to it. And what we did was, we always stopped at this village. We had a Caribbean guy named Ernesto, who spoke French and his Carib language, and Peter always had him come with us every single time. This was an example of climate change happening, which this was like years ago, and when we were going, we went to pick him up because he always came with us. He always stayed with us. And he had built the camps, he cooked the food, did all that. He was so good at it. He was like our helper. And this particular year, we went to pick him up, and he said, no, you can't go to the beach this year. And Peter said, why? He said, because there's going to be bad weather. He said dangerous weather, I think is what he said. And Peter was saying to me, oh God, now these old wives' tales from the Indians, because the weather was perfectly good. And he said, but Ernest refused to come, but she always did. So Peter said, okay, we'll be there the usual 2 weeks. Will you come and pick us up on this date? And left the date for him to come and pick us up and all that. And he said yes. And we went, Boo and Peter and I. We were the only 3 people on the beach. And he was tagging turtles and stuff. And the first week it seemed okay. The second week that we were there, the weather started looking, nothing happened, but it started looking really ominous. if you could ever imagine being in a place where you can't tell what the sea was and what the sky is,
Ooh, wow.
because you just it's just all in one. You're just like you in a vortex.
Right.
Wow.
This started happening like 3 days before we left, and it was scary because normally at 6 p.m. is when everything went dark in those areas, and it was going dark like about 4. You know, and I said, Peter, something's gonna happen. He said, oh well, let's pack everything. Well, what I forgot to tell you was he decided not. We usually used to build a camp with tents and stuff. He decided not to do that this year. He decided to we'll put all our hammocks in mangroves so we could sleep in the trees rather than on something.
yeah.
And so he did. It was very uncomfortable because you were wet most of the time.
Yeah.
And you know, mosquitoes and all kinds of things. But he put all of our hammocks, which we slept in the mangroves, into the mangrove trees, because there was behind the sea was like a river that was behind, and then past the river was you could see at a long distance the Carib village.
Okay.
If you had binoculars, you could see it was behind the river. So the sea actually came around, and then it flowed into the river. The river flowed into the sea, I guess is a better idea. And so there was water, the strip of land around, there was water behind, a river, and in front of us was the Atlantic Ocean.
Okay.
And so we were in these hammocks, and the night before we left, all of a sudden, well, the tide was coming up higher and higher every night. And this particular night before we left, there was a tsunami. All of a sudden, I looked out, and I could see the water coming.
Oh, wow.
Straight. So what Peter did was he tied me with the rope of the hammock into the tree, and he and Boo, they were taller.
Yeah.
They didn't, they were sort of hanging on to the hammock. I think they tied some of it around their hands and hanging on. This thing came, and I'll tell you exactly how I survived. It seemed like hours, but I guess it was 5 minutes at the highest of the peak. Whenever the water came in, this rush of thing, it would push me down into the thing, and I would hold my breath. And then when it went down, it would push me back up, and I'd be up. Then I'd come back, and it'd push me back down like that. And that went on for what seemed like hours, but Peter said it was probably 5 minutes at the peak of the high tide of the tsunami when it came in. It was awful. And then it just sort of drained off. It went back to normal height. And then the next day, of course, they didn't come. They were to pick us up that night. They never came. The next day, nobody came. And we were sitting there. We had nothing. All of our stuff, which Peter had decided because of the worry. We had big canisters, aluminum canisters. They put everything in the canisters. They all floated into the river. Everything. Bags with passports, cameras, they all floated. We got them back because they were in the river. They didn't sink.
Yeah.
But they floated into the river. And so the next day, we were there, and Peter says, I'm going to go off and just see if I could see anything happening. Yeah. And he left, never came back.
Oh, jeez.
Never came back. All day. Boo rode down to the thing, came back and said to me, well, Sibille, I have to tell you, all I have is Peter's footprints going into the river.
Oh, no.
And I'm shell-shocked at this time. I don't even know what's going on anymore. I'm just sort of whatever. And Boo is just like, I wonder if anybody will come and get us. Because we have no food, no water, everything is gone. And so we're sitting there looking, morale, yes, gone completely. And nighttime comes, 10 o'clock, no Peter.
Yeah.
Nothing. So we're deciding, we wonder if somebody's going to come over from the village and get us. And then we could find out what happened to Peter. Nothing happened. And then, like 1 a.m, we hear chuk, 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 chuk,
Oh,
chuk,
man,
chuk, chuk,
I can't
and there's
imagine.
a boat. And there are 2 fishermen, and Peter's in the boat with a flashlight.
Oh, man.
And he comes, and I am about to kill him. I'm just raving lunatic at this point.
Right.
And he comes off, and I said, well, how could you go off and leave us? And he said, listen, these people went fishing because this was a good time to go fishing after the thing. There were a lot of fish. And he said, they agreed to take me, but I had to go fishing with them first. They weren't going to take you to the place there and then come back and go fishing. They
had to
wanted
go
to go
fishing with
fishing
them.
now. So he decided to go with them because he wanted to make sure they came back.
Okay.
Because if they left and never came back, so he went fishing with them for the whole day
Wow.
Wow.
and came back. And they came back. They did get us. When we went to the village where the Caribs were, they had all drunk. They had this blue liquid that they made with some kind of alcohol. They were all drunk as a skunk everywhere because that's what they did their rain dance, and that's where they were, everybody. So they couldn't come get us because they were completely out of it. But yeah, that was one of those stories in French Guiana. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, that's something. Well, the last question we like to ask is something that's just for a lot of the listeners or younger students and interested in how they can make a difference. I'm curious, what advice would you give to someone looking to make science or turtle biology or something turtle related a career?
Never give up is my first thing, because Peter always said that, that being consistent, going after it. Now, sometimes you have to find ways that are a little more off the beaten path than others, unless you want. Peter never wanted to go straight into academics. He didn't want to be a professor. He was for a while, but he didn't. That wasn't what he wanted to do, because he wanted to be out in the open to do field work.
Yeah.
And so a lot of his friends and stuff who went that way, he did a lot of things with them as well, which is okay. But he didn't want to do that. His path was he wanted to be out in the field where he could do what he wanted. But it wasn't an easy way for him, because it was a very unusual way to get through it. I think he was the last person who was able to do that. To just find a way that's so completely different from anything else to do it. Because he was able to find people who were interested in turtles enough to subsidize all his work and stuff.
Yeah.
Which today is hard to find.
Yeah.
And at that time, he was lucky enough to do that. And so I think it's unusual to get. But I think that people who are young people, I just think the passion. If you have the passion, just keep on it. Don't give up, because and you might have to find different ways. It may not be the way that is the normal way of getting it, the thing you want to do. You may have to come up with different ideas and stuff. But I think that there's always a way. And I do think that I see so many young people making a difference in what they do. I see in Guyana, with just the satellite tagging and stuff, how many people are interested now, how passionate they are about it and so on. That you see that passion there. I just hope that they can find a way. Sometimes you have to go out in their field to do it. Sometimes you have to go in a different way. But keep it up. I mean, to me, the most important thing in the world right now, to me personally, are the people who make a difference in terms of the earth. What happens with the earth? What happens with nature? What happens with animals? Everybody belongs here, and I think that anything that helps eradication of species or anything like that, anything you can do to that is, to me, for the better good. I just feel that way. I think obviously all jobs are needed.
Yeah.
But I think that the people who have that niche to do those things that are for nature and to keep the world, climate change, to keep the world going the way it was, keep animals safe. I mean, all of the things that they used to do are sort of curtailed now, because a lot of their tigers, lions, elephants, a lot of their lions, a lot of their things are gone. Sea turtles, the hotels encroaching on their beaches, and so they have nowhere to nest and so on. So all of those things, that if you can do any of those things to make a difference with that, I think it's a good thing. And I don't come from a background of biology. I come from a background of just observing over 50 years. We're married 51 years. Of observing what I've seen all over the world, and where the difference really matters, where it really matters, where the things really have an impact and continue to have an impact. So I think to you all, what you're doing, I applaud very much so, and I think just keep it up and convert, bring other people onto your bandwagon, and certainly the turtles have. Peter said this early on, when with a lot of you all meeting. He said, turtles are in good shape because of the people who are coming after to look after them. He felt very strongly that the young people who are coming will make sure that they're in good shape. He really felt that. And he always, he felt what he was leaving behind was a legacy of people to follow, and they will. So, to you, I think that's what you're doing.
Thank you.
That's what you're doing. So, kudos.
Thank you so much. That means so much.
Yes. And so also, I guess to finish it off too, I'm curious to some extent to what kind of projects you're doing now. Chelsea mentioned some stuff in Bhutan and some interesting things.
Yeah, I've always been involved in the arts. Peter was the science and I was the arts.
Right.
And one of the things that we allowed for each other to do was he never curtailed anything I wanted to, never curtailed what. I couldn't curtail what he wanted to do. There was no, that wasn't possible.
Yeah.
In fact, I'll tell you something that my father said to me when I first got married to Peter. He said to me, if you want to be happy, this is his exact words. He said, if you want to be happy, realize that when you marry Peter Pritchard, you're marrying the world. You're not just marrying a man. So if you think you could curtail that world, you'll be very unhappy. And it was the best advice. Because it's true that I had to just let that go, let him do what he wanted to do, because I'd be miserable stopping that. I'd be sitting there being jealous of wherever he went or being upset. Half the time I thought he was dead because he never told me where you were. At that time, he'd go off to New Guinea and his policy was no news is good news. And I didn't follow that at all. So, especially when I had the kids. So it was really hard because sometimes he'd said he had no communication because he'd always been in a place where there's no communication.
Right.
And one other thing I'll tell you one time happened in Costa Rica, and you all may have heard this, when he was hit by a car.
No, I've never heard of this.
Peter was in Costa Rica, he was hit by a car. And on PBS, I'm sitting there, and on the radio comes over that some turtle specialist or whatever was hit by a car.
Oh, man.
And I'm thinking, how many turtle specialists are there again visiting Costa Rica?
Yeah.
So I ran over to my son. Sebastian was across the road in the house. And I said, your dad was hit by a car. He said, how do you know it's him? It's probably some Costa Rican person or whatever. Then I got a call from Chuck Schaefer, who was at a conference in Washington with turtle people, and they're all catching a fit because they just got the news that Peter was hit by a car. Oh, wow. And they're all calling me to ask me how bad it is. And I say, I haven't heard anything from him. And so I was really upset. I talked to Sebastian. He said, well, if he's with Simona, if anything had happened, Simona would call you. I said, suppose she was also hit by the car. But anyway, didn't hear anything. I was supposed to pick him up the next day at the airport. I went to the airport. Here comes Peter with a bandage here, and a bandage here, and a bandage here. He was hit by a bloody car. He just didn't want to tell me, and he told Simone not to say anything because he was okay. I mean, that was the Wow. I was
That's awesome.
Yeah,
and he was hit by a car because he hit someone. They were going to a museum, and there was this part of Costa Rica where there's a big roundabout and traffic was coming from, and this older person didn't see them, and actually hit them as they were going up the pavement. But it was one of those things where it wasn't too bad. But again, I don't know how much is because Peter always hit his head. I'm quite sure that was part of his problem in the end. He always was hitting his head. So I don't know whether they hit his head then. But anyway, but yes. So that was. But you're asking me about what I'm doing, and I was always in the arts, and the project I'm doing right now is I'm doing the first international film festival in Bhutan. Now, if you ask me the country that I'm most intrigued with right now, it's Bhutan. Mm-hmm. Lots of countries I went 100 and something countries, and it was all very wonderful, and I love them all. But Bhutan has been my real rant now. I love it. So we're doing a film festival because Bhutan is a country of happiness. The GDP is happiness.
Mm-hmm. Right.
And it is also, excuse me, more than 60% of the Constitution of the forest you cannot destroy. More than 60%.
Wow, that's
okay.
Amazing.
That's in the Constitution.
That's awesome.
And it's a kingdom, and the royal families, they're fantastic because they really think of the country in that way. and the people are wonderful. So anyway, so we're doing a festival. I've never done a festival in my life, ever. But we went to Cannes Film Festival, the guest of Cannes Film Festival this year. Yeah, this year. And so I got to see how festivals, the best of the festivals, is run. So that was a good thing. And so we're doing this, and it's in September 2024. And I've been to Bhutan twice, and worked with. We have a group of people we're working with, and it's really quite. I'm one of the founders. I became the founder of the Bhutan Film Institute, because in order to do the festival, you had to have a film institute.
Right.
Wow.
So I did the film institute first, and then so that's done. We had a big opening. I'll show you the book of it. We had a big opening of the film institute, and with the royal family and stuff, and that's done. And then now we're doing the and we hope to have a lot. It's going to be done with nature, because they're very much into conservation and nature. I mean, it's one of the few countries. There are 4 countries in the world that protect their tigers, and in a big way. And the way they do it is they have the farmers help to do it. They pay the farmers to give enough land to the tigers so they can roam more. The only problem with that is that they breed more now, so you have to find more and more places.
Yeah.
And so they're really, really good at doing it. So I think there are 4 countries that, and India has a program like that, and I think Borneo, but Bhutan is one of the few countries that preserve. So they're very, very good at nature. So the nature part of it and the art part of it is the perfect collaboration for me.
Right.
So it brings that together. And so there are turtles in Bhutan, but not a lot. But there is somebody studying turtles in Bhutan. I have to find out about that. There is somebody doing that. And so that's my biggest project right now that I'm doing. I have other things here that I do. I'm the vice chairman of the Performing Arts Center here, which is a big performing arts center. So I do a lot of stuff there with them. But for the festival, we wanted to have that kind of, it's going to be small. It's going to be the way Sundance started. We're working with the Sundance people.
Oh, wonderful.
And so it's going to be the way, it's not going to be starting off with a big way. Plus, they don't have the capacity to have a big festival.
Right.
So, because of hotels and stuff, but they have very good things. But that's how it's starting. We have several people in the movie world and in the music world who are very well known, who are very into this sort of thing, Buddhism, and into this kind of lifestyle, who are going to come and perform, and the names are amazing. I can't say, but you'd be amazed at who they are. So it's going to be good. So I'm going to go back to Bhutan in February to continue this. But so that's my big project right now. And I love it.
That sounds great.
Amazing.
Yeah, that is. And then I guess the last thing is regarding the Turtle Conservancy and such, and your role with them, and what do you think of the situation, I guess?
Yeah. Well, I'm very excited because Eric Good, who was a good friend of Peter's, and whose aesthetic is the same in terms of what things look like. I mean, I think Eric is a person with one of the best taste in the world. By the way, I think he's just amazing. It's the kind of taste I enjoy. It's not usual. It's very unusual and different and so on and so forth. But I think he's wonderful at that, which is what we aspire to with the museum. As you know, 18,000 specimens, you all helped pack them up, were removed and sent to Ojai, where the museum is going to be built. It's going to be part of a huge project that Eric is doing. The museum will be the center piece of it, where they're moving a lot of the animals and stuff, the turtles and tortoises that are in the other part of it will be moved over to 2.0, which is be the new center. And it's going to be a scientific museum where people could come and do research as well with the specimens, as well as a place where people could go and visit.
Yeah.
And so the architect is working on it. It's amazing. I've seen the architecture of it. It'll take a little while because in Ojai in California, that nothing was done quickly because of all the regulations and rules and things.
Right.
But hopefully soon. It's going well. I'm on the board of the Turtle Conservancy, and so I meet with them and I have input very much a lot of input. Rick Ridgway and Eric and those people who have a lot of input, and I really trust their judgment on this. In fact, if it couldn't have been a better world for it to go to. Peter had two places in mind. The University of Florida was the first, only because of his role with the University of Florida and his role with Archie Carr. And so that's where I first went to. It didn't work out for various reasons. And then so Eric decided to take it on, which I am forever grateful for. But in fact, I think it's better it's not in Florida, which is the shame, but I think it's better for what it's going to be in Ohio. So I'm really excited about it. And I do have a lot of input. My youngest son, Cameron, came with me to the last board meeting, and he saw all of the stuff, how it's done, how you all have seen that, I'm sure, and what's going to happen stuff. And he's very excited about it too. And Cameron is very into urban planning. That's his job. So he was very excited about what they're planning to do. So I think the future is, the future is great. That for the what it holds in terms of what's going to happen to CRI, and CRI blends in quite well to Turtle Conservancy.
Oh, very much so.
I agree.
And I love it. And the other thing I want to say was that in December last year, the United Nations honored Peter with a hero award, and it was quite something posthumously, because the only two people have ever got it posthumously, and what happened was that Eric was given an award as well, because for the continuity of CRI, and so the awards were given last time. It was amazing, so very happy about that too.
Wonderful.
Very happy.
That's really good. Yeah. Well, I guess if you'd like to say anything else, we kind of are wrapping up. If anyone's got anything else.
Go ahead.
I think we've
covered it, literally everything.
Yeah, this has been incredible.
wonderful episode.
Yeah, we didn't talk too much. Please edit.
There's
that was amazing. That was
yes. Thank you so much. Yeah, it really has been an honor to talk with you and to get your perspective and to hear the stories.
Well, I do believe in storytelling.
Yes.
I really do. I think that people I think the science has to be there, but I think if you want to reach everybody, the science has to be done in a way where people can understand, and where storytelling.
Yeah.
As you know, it's no point, as Peter said, you don't want to preach to the choir all the time. You have to have the science to keep things going. You have to study it. I understand all of that. But if you want to get the people, general population, interested in the plight of turtles or the plight of any other thing, you have to engage them. And the way you engage them is through storytelling. Yeah. You do the science and then tell the stories, so they could be, properly be educated as well as entertained. Yeah. Both.
Wonderful. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, all at the end too. We do something. We don't have to do this, but I guess turtles isn't your area of study. But we like to do a turtle trivia round.
God, I wouldn't pass it at all.
Yeah, well, so I'm thinking if you've got a question, just something random, and you want to throw it at us, but
okay,
if not,
yeah, I'll throw it at you.
Okay.
To all trivia, and you can answer individually. I am absolutely fascinated by what makes people engage in anything they do with the passion that they do. Which the three of you have. You have that passion. Yeah. Well, how do you maintain? I understand where it came from. It came from early days of liking turtles, I assume.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
How do you maintain it?
How do you keep up that passion, and what makes you want to keep it up?
At least for me, it's kind of what fuels me. I mean, it doesn't seem like there really requires an uptake, more of maybe just kind of being regulated. Like it's kind of, it comes from deep within, and just as without that, there's no purpose for me to exist. It's just how how I operate. I'm dedicated to something. That's just, I couldn't exist without that. I can't speak for them, but for me,
you.
That's how I am.
Yeah, it's very similar with me. I mean, I can't imagine a world. It doesn't just stop at turtles for me, although that's my main focus, as they're one of the most troubled groups of animals in the world, and I believe they need more help more than most. But I believe man and nature need to stay connected, and we can't sever that connection. And I believe turtles are one of the hugest icons throughout religion, throughout the entire history of man. And I think preserving that is one of the best ways that we can stay in touch with the planet. And I love working with animals. I just love everything about living creatures, and that's just what drives me, is to preserve that. Yeah. So people can appreciate it just as much as I do.
It's like the hardest question for me. I really don't know, and it's something that keeps evolving. I mean, I think initially I picked up a small book about turtles and just became fascinated with the organism, and that's just expanded into a fascination with travel, with meeting different people, hearing stories, and now it's actually get to the point of like applying science and data science, that kind of thing, and numbers, that kind of thing. And it's all these different areas that are, I think, separate interests that have come out of this. But keeping the motivation, for me at least, some of it is like, oh wow, I'm capable of doing this. I need to keep going with it in a lot of ways. Yeah. It is kind of like it's self-replicating almost, and just like, okay, we can do this, then let's keep going. So there's a little bit of that, but then just it all comes back to the organism itself. So it's a tough thing to answer because it's so much, and I'm changing is the interest.
And I think happiness, I'm really onto this whole happiness theory now, and I think because of partly I'm a Buddhist, but also because of getting involved with AI and happiness. I do think that that things that make you happy do propel you to keep on doing it. If there's no interest, you're not happy.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So if there's interest and you're happy, so that it has to do with that too. Well, how good does it make you feel if you do it? If you feel really good doing it, then keep on doing it.
Yeah, it's the best.
The day that you feel bored or uninterested or whatever, then it goes. But as long as you have the passion for it and you keep it, well, good.
I think we can all agree that being around turtles is one of the best feelings in the world.
Yeah. Yes. I didn't really understand that for a long, long time. I have to tell you, because, I didn't come from, animals. We had dogs, we had parrots, macaws that spoke and things like that when I was growing up. But turtles were something that I did not have any. I think I saw a turtle probably twice in my life before Peter. And I'm again where turtles are, because it was of no interest. Once in a while you say, oh, there's a turtle walking around. I remember when I was a little girl seeing a turtle and was very fascinated at the fact it carried its house. That's how my father said to me, oh, he carries his house on his back. And he just, that's his house. And that I remember being fascinated with that. But I had no idea, no interest at all. And it took me a while, because in the beginning when Peter would talk about turtles, I'd be so bored. It's like, oh God. And I always said I'll never learn anything about turtles, because then our entire life would be me talking about turtles and him talking. Right? So I made a vow, I'm never going to learn anything about turtles. But what happened was that if you're in it 24 hours a day, you learn it by osmosis. You, no matter what. And then I got interested in liking them, because before my favorite animal always for my entire life were pandas. Okay. I'm a little girl. And I got to see real pandas and stuff in China and watching the babies and all that. So that was a thrill for me. But that was my favorite animal growing up, and until I was old. But turtles for me, I had no interest at all. And Peter used to always say, but look at this lovely one, is different from this one, is different from that one. And I always used to be very suspicious, because I thought he tried to kill me with frogs. And the reason why I say that is because I used to hate frogs. I mean, in a way where if a frog was there, I would go there. I couldn't stand them. Because as a kid, they used to throw it on your backs, these little slimy frogs. So I couldn't stand them. I mean, seriously. And so he told me, the way he got me to like frogs was he bought me these beautiful, we were married in Gainesville. He bought me these beautiful little tiny frogs that were green and fluorescent and red and fluorescent and blue. Absolutely, they were like brooches. Absolutely beautiful. And he kept them in a little thing. And I just loved them. And Archie Carr came over one day and he said, Sibille, are you keeping poison arrow frogs?
Oh.
And I said, what do you mean? he said, those things are the most poisonous things. You don't have a cut or anything, do you? And he said, where'd you get them? I said, Peter gave them to me. He said, is he trying to kill you? I said, well, I guess so. I had no idea. But that's how I got to like frogs. And so they used to sell them in Gainesville that time. So he bought me these 4 little poison arrow frogs, and they were and so I was keeping them, looking after them.
Yeah.
And Archie was the one who told me that they were poison arrow. Peter never said anything. So when he came home, I said, "You're taking these frogs back," because I just heard what they were. He took them back to the place. But he said, "But you like frogs now, don't you?" They're done. And that was what got over my fear of frogs.
Exposure therapy.
And similarly with turtles, I never used to pay any attention, not a turtle, they're all the same. And he started showing me them from, different ways and what they look like and stuff. And then when I was in the Galapagos, of course, I lived with them so much they were like part of my family, because they were in the camps when we always had to, the places we went to camp for 2 months or whatever was the tortoise places.
Yeah.
So that's where I lived with them. They'd come walking through, knocking over my pots, whatever, I mean.
That's incredible.
And everything. The kids were on them, riding them. So it became part of my life, and then it became like. Eventually, I got very fond of them, and now I love them. But I had no interest whatsoever, and it grew on me. But my kids, it's just the opposite. They never got interested in turtles. Never. All of their friends would come over and spend the whole time talking to Peter or looking at turtles. All the time.
That's funny.
That's great.
They never did. And the reason was, but they're both good writers. They're all good writers, so they took that part of me and Peter. But I think that they were so engrossed in it, and they made a conscious effort that they couldn't tell you a box turtle from a gopher. If you asked them.
They were so, wow.
They deliberately, they're around them all the time, but they just never paid attention. I don't think they've ever read any of Peter's books. Any.
Wow.
I think Cameron read Tibide. I think Cameron did. Yeah. The turtles, they lived with them, they accepted them. And it was part of their life and everything, but they never got interested in them. And in a way, I am not... Perhaps I wished if they got a little more interested, but in a way, they know everything about Peter. I mean, they know everything about him and his work. They're just the turtles themselves they don't know anything about. In a way, I wish they had, only because, now that all these specimens that are at Ojai, they could have gone and said, "Oh, this one is from here, or this one is from here."
Yeah,
and they know nothing. They know nothing about it. So that's the only thing about it. But the good thing is that I'm glad of, is that if they'd gone into studying turtles, it would have been a horrible career for them, because there's no way you could live up to Peter.
Yeah.
And that would have always been, this is the other Pritchard boy or whatever,
Yeah.
And so in a way, I'm glad they didn't, because Peter's reputation was he was such a different, and such a caliber, they'd never been able to match that, never.
Yeah.
So, and then people would have thought that, if they got any breaks or anything, it's because of their dad, and that they were, so it's just as well.
Yeah, it's hard to deal with that. I guess one more thing that kind of related to the question you asked us, but it's different, is what do you think, this is a kind of a philosophical question even, the key to a good life is?
Trust. In terms, you're talking about in terms of relationship, you're talking about life in general?
Just in general, but any way you want to take it.
Okay, in general, I think that, this is from Buddhist philosophy, and I was brought Catholic, this is from Buddhist philosophy, is that there really is no tomorrow. Every day is today.
Yeah.
Today, when you get up to tomorrow, it's not tomorrow. When you get up, it's today. So I think one needs to, carpe diem is the thing, is live the best day you can. It doesn't mean that you can't be sad, or you can't be angry, or you can't any of those things, because those are all parts of human emotions.
Right.
But make it so you can live the best the day that you can. And it sounds simplistic, but by that I mean is that I've had a lot of tragedy in my life, and one of the ways that I dealt with it was to realize that once something has happened, you can't bring it back. So you don't let that go. You have to let go. And problems are like rain. It stops. Think of it as rain. My son says to me, "You've been in a lot of tsunamis," but think of it as rain that will eventually. That's my philosophy generally, in having a better life. Is there self-control to some extent? Is there free will to some extent? But a lot of it is what comes at you the day, how you take it, and what happens. There's some things you just can't control. If I walk out there and a car hit me, nothing. So what you can, to some extent, is to just take the day. I always say there's no tomorrow. I have to live today as today. Today is today. Now, people always say to me, you can't do that with money.
Right.
Yeah, that's a little bit.
Because you have to keep. There is a tomorrow with money.
Yes.
Yeah.
But so different ways in which you think of it. But in terms of relationships, I think trust.
Okay.
I think you have to just trust. If there's trust, and Peter and I had, I had to learn to do that. That wasn't so in the beginning, obviously, but eventually, both of us learned that trust was the most important thing, because we're living such different lives and doing things all the time. If I didn't trust him and he goes off for 2 months in wherever, that he's not sort of doing what I think should be the right thing, then I'd be worried and mad and jealous. You can't do that. If you trust the person, then that doesn't come into the equation. It doesn't come into the equation. And that was the thing that I think that for us being as different, because Peter and I were very, very different. We were married. I mean, he called me the princess, and I was no scientific background whatsoever. Couldn't care less about it. I was very much into the arts, and literature was my degree, and so I had to sort of balance that with him, because he came from a very scientific background, and that's how he thought. Very linearly, one step, whereas I was all over the place all the time. And to me that trust is well. And then in the general sense, I think is, friends and family are what's important in the long run. Who you try. Again, it's about trust. Friends and family. If you have good friends, a good family. I have good friends. I discovered how many good friends I've had with all the tragedies I've been through, and they were always there.
Wow.
So
Yeah. It seems to have definitely done you and Peter a lot of good throughout your life. It's trust.
Yeah, trust was the most important thing. In the beginning, it was difficult. Because, especially with me as a journalist, I don't trust anybody.
Right.
Anything they tell me,
Yeah.
let me check it 4 times, 5 times.
Right.
Yeah.
Not so sure that's what you mean when you say that or whatever. It was the first few years we were married, we were like, just trying to get through. The thing, I'll tell you what's the most important thing to me, and I forgot this is to be able to laugh. Okay. Anybody could make me. That's why I married Peter.
Okay.
Because he made me laugh. I mean, he was so absurd that everything he did made me laugh. Yeah. And even when we were married and had arguments and rows, where I was about to throw him off the nearest roof, he would say something that was so ridiculous. I'd have to go in the bathroom, lock the door, have a laugh, and then come out again. Because it would be so funny. Even though I'm mad as hell, but I can't let him see me. Because he would always say something absolutely ridiculous. That would be, and the kids say the same thing about him. They could never get mad with him. Because, he had his own ways of doing things that they could never get mad. Mm-hmm. But yeah, it's a sense of humor. Anybody has a good sense of humor. I love to laugh, and anything that's funny, he'll get me. And that was really the reason. No matter how serious he was, he would always have these things that were so funny. And luckily, my youngest son, Cameron, has exactly, as you can tell you, has exactly the same sense of humor. It's dry and funny. You have to listen sometimes because you don't realize how funny it is, what he's saying. But Peter, you had to listen because a lot of it was English humor.
Yeah, I get it.
Yeah.
But yeah, so from that, yeah. Yeah, very. So, have a laugh. You want to be able to laugh. Don't take life so seriously that you can't laugh at things. That's the other thing.
I think that's beautiful.
Yeah, I do have one more question.
Yeah.
It's a testament to the depth of the conversation
Yeah.
because we try to end it like an hour
Yeah.
ago.
But
yeah,
you
it
don't
just
have to. You
keeps
do a
going.
lot of editing.
No, I
editing.
think just in terms of the breaks, but everything else is just this has been
This
amazing.
is
Very
just,
complete,
it's
smooth.
been so smooth and
But-
so well done.
So I'm curious about one thing because you mentioned with that quote the philosophy, but there is one thing: the money. You can't really live day to day. You've got to think about that.
Yeah.
I'm curious what Dr. Pritchard and your philosophy in terms of getting funding and that sort of thing. As you mentioned, it was different maybe back then than it is now, and what you think
Yeah.
about that.
Well, we lived in very little when we were in the beginning, because Peter was sort of an whatever, professor at UF that wasn't paying much money. Then he got a job with IUCN and were married, and that was, not a lot of money. I'll tell you how much it was not a lot of money. This is very funny. When we were going to Baja California, this is before we were married, when we were going to Baja California, Peter had a credit card, and he said to me, it was a MasterCard, he said to me, I said, do you have money? He said, oh yeah, lots of money. And luckily I had some, okay, because I didn't go anywhere. My father had brought me up as you don't go anywhere with a man unless you have money.
Yeah.
Just in case you have to sort of get yourself out of anything. So I had my little kitty, but I didn't tell him about. But anyway, he said yes. And so as we're going along, this is a trip that's going to take a couple of months,
Yeah.
right?
Right.
I finally say, how much money is on your credit card? $300.
Oh man.
Sounds like me.
That was what we traveled to Baja California. That's what he had. $300. And maybe,
For a few months, right?
yeah. And maybe in his pocket, 50 or something. But the credit card was the bulk. I mean, that was in the beginning. So in terms of money, in the beginning we didn't have any money. I had to learn how to, because I came from a family that, I was spoiled. I got whatever I wanted. Mm-hmm. And so I didn't know where the money came from. As far as I'm concerned, it grew on trees. I was never told anything. I would just ask for it and I'll get it. And do this and I'll get it. And my father never made any things about. I didn't know whether they had money or didn't have money. I just know I got things.
Yeah.
Okay? So with Peter, he did tell me, he did say to me, to be fair to him, he did say, just realize that you can't sort of go into the store and pick up what you want and charge it, which is what I used to do in Guyana, and so on, that, you have to live within a budget. I was like, what's a budget? I worked for years as a journalist. I got my own money, but that was my budget. That was, what do you mean your budget? Yeah. Anyway, and so we couldn't go to fancy restaurants, which I was used to going to.
Yeah.
When we lived in Gainesville, I went to restaurants I didn't know existed. Because, with just hot dogs and so on.
Yeah.
And I was like, this is what we're having for dinner? Yeah, this is our date night.
Nice.
And so money was in the bit, but Peter never put a big premium on money. Mm-hmm. It's really funny. He was very lucky that he used to call it, what was the word? Serendipity.
Okay.
That it's always serendipitous. Whatever he talked about, people would fund. He had one big funder that did the institute and everything. But his programs and stuff, when he talked to people about it, they would do it. They would fund it. But he also, and this I found when Peter died, he was really, really good about keeping records. You would never think so because he never gave you that impression. But Peter was very organized in his mind for certain things, very organized with money. I wasn't at all, and thank God, because I'd be in jail. But Sebastian always says that Peter's the last person in the world who could get rid of living this lifestyle that we did, because without a lot of money, we did a lot of things all over the world. But we did sacrifice some things to do that.
Yeah.
Whether the house needed painting, he'd say, you want to paint the house or you want to go to Galapagos again? Galapagos!
Oh, look at that.
That's true.
While everybody
awesome.
making their house fancier and fancier,
Yeah.
that was not a priority.
Right.
So there were some things that were, we had to, not having a lot of money, it got better. And of course, when I started working in business and stuff, you work for a lot more money than you work for in turtles.
Yeah.
So when I started working in business, then there was, in terms of money flowing to me, and then I was able to help the institute because I did a lot of things. I donated a lot of money and stuff, things he did and stuff, because I was doing pretty well in that. I was in a different environment than he was.
Yeah.
But and so we shared it all the time. But Peter did very, very well in managing his money and managing things and making sure that that the family was well looked after and so on and so forth. And he did an amazing job considering money was never a priority for him. Never. His parents used to always worry about that he was doing turtles. All his brothers were doctors and stuff. Peter, how are you going to live? It was always. In fact, my father did say to me when we got married, "Is he going to study turtles?" And I said yes. And he says, "How do you make a living in that?"
Got that question.
He did say
to
that.
answer that.
Yeah. But he did. He was the last person, I think, to find that. Well, at that time, to find that. But he was very. So in terms of the money, we did manage. He was very good at managing money. I mean, our kids all went to private schools. Sebastian went to Oxford. He was on scholarship. Dominic, my son, went to school in Ireland, his high school, and then Cameron went to University of Wales for his philosophy degrees, and so I think it all turned out all right in the end in terms of being able to manage money, but it wasn't like we had all this money to throw around. People thought you're rich because of the Rolls Royce.
Yeah.
Gotcha.
I had to say no, we aren't. But he, So in terms of that, we had to manage. We didn't have for years. I mean, for probably the first 10 years of our life, we had no money. It got better and better. And as Peter wrote books and did things, and although he sounds much nothing, did films, did a lot of things that would, lectures and things that all kinds of things that would bring extra money. But he never really. Money. He told me that. He said, "If you want to be rich, go work." He told me that, and I did, because he said this is not going to bring in, and most of his money went in buying turtles, studying turtles, and buying cycads that lasted 1 year. He paid $200 for a leaf. He used to go buy these cycads everywhere. It used to drive me nuts, and. They put out a second leaf in 20 years. They got one leaf now, and the next leaf comes out in 20 years. I used to say, Peter, every cycad you buy, you wouldn't live to see get big. Yeah. Because it'll take 100 years for them to get this size. They're thousands of years old, cycads. Yeah. Thousands. Around dinosaurs, since dinosaurs. So.
That's incredible.
Yeah, it really is. Well, I think we'll wrap it up for real now.
Yeah.
But that was, thank you so much.
You're welcome.
It's really an honor, and thanks for letting us come visit.
Yes, that was amazing.
That was
I have something I'm going to show you.
Okay.
I have something I'm going to show you that shows how Peter thinks. There's a big problem in Guyana right now where Venezuela is claiming most of Guyana, which has been going on since the 1800s. Mm-hmm. When we were in Quito one time, Peter went into a shop, a bookshop that sold old maps and stuff. A German guy owned it. And he found this book that he bought. He paid $7,000 for it. I nearly killed him, okay? And he gave the guy a check, which was even more ridiculous. The guy trusted him. Anyhow, he bought this thing, and then he was so enamored in it. He found out there was a second one that he had to get, one that was sort of part of it. And he had Tim, who used to work for us at the time, research for like 2 years on the internet how to find the second part of it. I have it now, the two of them upstairs. The first one, the British one, is all the boundaries and all the work done on the Guyana problem they have right now. And the second one is the Venezuelan story. The part of it, and both of them together, there were like 4 copies in the world, and one is in the Library of Congress, one is in the archives in Treasury in Britain, One, I believe, is in Venezuela, and I have the other one. Let me show you.
All right. Well,
And
that's
this-
been episode 48.
Yeah.
We'll sign off now.
Yeah.
But
I'll
thank
show
you.
this to you. And the thing about it is that if